Have you ever fallen asleep to the chaotic sounds of Peter Griffin crashing through a wall or Stewie plotting world domination? Tonight we're diving deep into the bizarre, twisted, and surprisingly intricate world of Family Guy lore that's somehow become the perfect background noise for millions of viewers worldwide. From the hidden connections between episodes that span decades to the dark secrets lurking beneath Quahog's surface, this is your ultimate guide to the Family Guy universe that will either help you drift off to dreamland or keep you wide awake, questioning everything you thought you knew about America's most dysfunctional animated family. Family Guy has been on our screens for over 2 decades now, and what started as a simple animated sitcom has evolved into something far more complex and layered than most people realize. Tonight we're going to explore the deep lore, the recurring mysteries, the character backstories that only dedicated fans know about, and all the subtle details that make this show a fascinating rabbit hole to fall down as you're trying to fall asleep. Let's start with the Griffin family themselves, because there's so much more to these characters than meets the eye. Peter Griffin isn't just a bumbling father figure. His backstory reveals a man shaped by abandonment, neglect, and a desperate need for acceptance that manifests in increasingly destructive ways. We learn throughout the series that Peter was adopted, never knowing his real father until much later in the show's run. This abandonment issue explains so much about his behavior, his need to be the center of attention, and his often childlike approach to solving problems. But here's where it gets interesting for our sleepy exploration. Peter's job history reads like a fever dream. He's worked at a toy factory, been a fisherman, worked at a brewery, become a bodyguard, tried his hand at being a country music star, worked as a private investigator, and somehow ended up back at the brewery multiple times. Each job change represents a different phase of the show's evolution, and if you're watching chronologically as you fall asleep, you can actually track the show's tonal shifts through Peter's career moves. Lois Griffin presents an even more fascinating character study for our nighttime viewing. She comes from the wealthy Pewterschmidt family, which immediately sets up this class conflict that runs throughout the entire series. Her father, Carter Pewterschmidt, represents old money, conservative values, and everything that Peter both despises and desperately wants to be accepted by. Lois chose Peter over her privileged background, but this choice haunts their relationship in subtle ways that become more apparent when you're watching with sleepy, unfocused attention. The really interesting lore element here is how Lois's musical background keeps surfacing throughout the series. She's classically trained, she's performed professionally, and there are hints that she gave up a potentially successful career to become a housewife and mother. These musical moments in the show often serve as brief respites from the chaos, making them perfect for viewers who are using the show to wind down. Now let's talk about Meg, because her character arc is actually one of the most complex and disturbing elements of the Family Guy universe. What starts as typical teenage awkwardness evolves into something much darker. The family's treatment of Meg goes beyond normal sibling rivalry or parental frustration. It becomes a systematic emotional abuse that the show initially played for laughs, but gradually reveals as genuinely harmful. The lore around Meg includes several episodes that suggest she's actually the most mentally stable and capable member of the family, which makes her treatment even more tragic. She's shown to be intelligent, talented, and capable of genuine empathy, qualities that the rest of the family either ignores or actively punishes. For viewers drifting off to sleep, Meg's storylines often provide a strange sort of comfort because they're usually quieter and more introspective than the main family chaos. Chris Griffin's character development follows a different trajectory entirely. While he's often dismissed as the dumb kid, the show's lore reveals that Chris has artistic talent, musical ability, and emotional intelligence that surpasses most of his family members. His relationship with his father is complicated by Peter's own insecurities about masculinity and success. Chris represents the possibility of breaking the cycle of dysfunction, which gives his character an underlying hopefulness that works well for bedtime viewing. But let's dive into the real star of Family Guy's complex lore, Stewie Griffin. This character has undergone one of the most dramatic evolutionary arcs in television history. He started as a genuinely evil baby bent on world domination and matricide, but gradually transformed into a complex character dealing with identity, sexuality, and belonging. The show never explicitly addresses this transformation, which creates this fascinating ambiguity about whether Stewie actually changed or whether we're just seeing different aspects of his personality. The time travel episodes featuring Stewie create some of the most intricate lore in the entire series. His future selves, his various timelines, and his technological capabilities suggest a level of intelligence and capability that extends far beyond what we see in regular episodes. These time travel storylines often involve quieter, more contemplative moments that are perfect for viewers who are trying to relax. Stewie's relationship with Brian creates another layer of lore that's perfect for our sleepy exploration. Their friendship transcends the typical pet-owner relationship and becomes something closer to intellectual partnership. They travel together, solve problems together, and engage in philosophical discussions that often serve as the show's more thoughtful moments. Their dynamic provides a consistent emotional anchor throughout the series' more chaotic elements. Speaking of Brian, his character lore is incredibly rich and often overlooked. He's not just a talking dog. He's a failed writer, a recovering alcoholic, a liberal intellectual, and someone struggling with depression and self-worth issues. His various romantic relationships throughout the series reveal someone desperately seeking validation and connection. His death and resurrection in later seasons created one of the most emotionally impactful storylines in the show's history, demonstrating how attached viewers had become to his character. The setting of Quahog itself deserves exploration in our lore deep dive. This fictional Rhode Island town has its own mythology, complete with local celebrities, recurring businesses, and a distinct culture. The Drunken Clam serves as a central gathering place where much of the show's male bonding and philosophical discussions occur. Mort Goldman's pharmacy, the local news station, and various other businesses create a sense of continuity and community that grounds the more absurd elements of the show. Cleveland's departure and return to the series creates interesting lore implications. His time in Virginia with his own spin-off show exists in the same universe, and references to his experiences there occasionally surface in Family Guy episodes. This interconnected universe concept adds depth for viewers who are familiar with both shows. Quagmire's character provides some of the darkest lore in the entire series. While often played for laughs, his behavior patterns suggest serious psychological issues and criminal tendencies. The show occasionally hints at a more complex backstory involving his father's gender transition, his military service, and his dysfunctional relationship patterns. These darker elements create an interesting contrast with his seemingly cheerful demeanor. Joe Swanson's backstory as a disabled police officer adds another layer of complexity to the Quahog community. His accident, his marriage to Bonnie, and his struggle to maintain his sense of purpose and masculinity after becoming paralyzed provide some of the show's more serious emotional content. His friendship with Peter, Cleveland, and Quagmire often explores themes of loyalty, acceptance, and adaptation that work well for contemplative viewing. The show's cutaway gags, while seemingly random, actually create their own form of lore through recurring characters and situations. Conway Twitty appearances, the various historical figures Peter claims to have interacted with, and the recurring joke characters all contribute to the show's internal mythology. These cutaways often provide brief mental breaks that can be soothing for viewers trying to wind down. Family Guy's approach to continuity is deliberately loose, which actually makes it perfect for casual viewing. Unlike serialized dramas that require intense attention to plot details, Family Guy episodes can be enjoyed independently while still rewarding longtime viewers with references and callbacks. This makes it ideal for background viewing or for times when you're not paying complete attention. The show's musical numbers deserve special mention in our lore exploration. From Conway Twitty performances to elaborate Broadway-style productions, these musical interludes often serve as the show's most memorable and emotionally resonant moments. They break up the rapid-fire joke delivery and provide opportunities for character development and emotional expression. The various holiday episodes throughout the series create their own seasonal lore. Christmas episodes often explore themes of family, tradition, and redemption. Halloween episodes venture into horror and supernatural territory. These special episodes often feature higher production values and more elaborate storytelling that reward dedicated viewing. The show's treatment of religion, politics, and social issues creates ongoing lore threads that reflect changing social attitudes over the show's long run. Early episodes approach these topics differently than later ones, creating an interesting timeline of cultural evolution that can be tracked through the series' progression. Guest appearances and celebrity encounters in Family Guy often become part of the show's lore through recurring references and callbacks. These celebrity interactions sometimes extend beyond single episodes, creating ongoing relationships and references that reward longtime viewers. The various alternate reality and parallel universe episodes explore different versions of the Griffin family and Quahog community. These episodes often reveal character depths and relationship dynamics that aren't apparent in regular episodes. They also provide opportunities to explore what-if scenarios that add complexity to our understanding of the main characters. Family Guy's animation style evolution tells its own story about the show's development and budget changes over time. Early episodes have a distinctly different look and feel compared to more recent ones. This visual evolution creates a subtle timeline that longtime viewers can use to place episodes chronologically, even without checking air dates. The show's relationship with Fox Network, including its cancellation and resurrection, becomes part of its own meta-lore. Episodes that reference these real-world events blur the line between fiction and reality in ways that add extra layers for dedicated fans to discover and contemplate. As we wind down our exploration of Family Guy's rich lore landscape, it's worth noting that this depth and complexity is part of what makes the show so suitable for repeated viewing and background watching. There's always another layer to discover, another connection to make, another character detail to notice. Whether you're actively watching or letting it play, while you drift off to sleep, Family Guy's universe provides a consistent, familiar, and surprisingly deep world to explore. The beauty of Family Guy lore for bedtime viewing lies in its perfect balance of familiarity and discovery. You can watch episodes you've seen dozens of times and still notice new details, catch references you missed before, or simply let the familiar voices and situations wash over you as you relax. The show's episodic nature means you won't lose important plot threads if you fall asleep mid-episode, but its rich lore rewards those moments when you find yourself unexpectedly engaged and alert. Sweet dreams, and remember that somewhere in Quahog, Peter Griffin is probably about to do something that will somehow make perfect sense within the wonderfully chaotic universe that has been entertaining us for over 2 decades. You know that feeling when you're lying in bed scrolling through endless videos trying to find something that'll help you drift off to sleep? Most people go for rain sounds or meditation videos, but there's this weird corner of the internet that's discovered something completely unexpected: Family Guy lore videos. And honestly, it makes perfect sense once you think about it. Picture this: Peter Griffin's bumbling voice rambling about some ridiculous backstory while you slowly fade into dreamland. It's like having that one friend who tells really long, meandering stories that somehow become the perfect background noise for sleep. But here's the thing: Family Guy isn't just random jokes and cutaway gags. There's actually this incredibly deep, twisted universe hiding beneath all the chaos, and when you start exploring it at bedtime, something magical happens. Tonight, we're diving into the strangest, most soothing rabbit hole on YouTube. We're talking about Family Guy lore that's specifically designed to help you sleep. And trust me, by the end of this journey, you'll understand why millions of people are choosing Stewie's time travel adventures over counting sheep. Let's start with why this works so well. Your brain needs something engaging enough to distract from racing thoughts, but not so stimulating that it keeps you awake. Family Guy lore hits this sweet spot perfectly. The familiar voices create a sense of comfort, like having old friends nearby. The storylines are complex enough to occupy your mind, but delivered in that laid-back, conversational tone that naturally slows your heart rate. The beauty of Family Guy as sleep content lies in its structure. Unlike other shows that build tension toward climactic moments, Family Guy operates on this weird, episodic flow where nothing is too serious or urgent. Even when Peter is destroying the town or Stewie is plotting world domination, there's this underlying absurdity that signals to your brain that everything is okay. It's chaos, but comfortable chaos. One of the most popular sleep topics is Stewie's time travel timeline. Now, if you've watched the show casually, you might think Stewie's time adventures are just random episodes. But when you dig deeper, there's this incredibly complex web of cause and effect that spans decades. Stewie has literally shaped the Griffin family history in ways most viewers never realize. Think about it. In one timeline, Stewie prevents his own birth, which creates this paradox where he exists but shouldn't. In another, he saves his father's life, completely altering the family dynamic. These aren't just throwaway episodes. They're building blocks of an intricate multiverse where every action ripples through time. And when someone narrates this in a gentle, sleepy voice while you're tucked in bed, it becomes this dreamy exploration of cause and effect that naturally leads your mind into sleep. The time travel lore gets even more interesting when you consider Stewie's relationship with Brian. Their adventures through different eras reveal hidden layers of both characters. Brian isn't just the family dog who talks. He's this tortured intellectual who's lived through multiple timelines, sometimes remembering previous versions of events, sometimes completely oblivious. The complexity of their friendship across different realities becomes this beautiful, melancholy meditation on friendship and loyalty. What makes this perfect for sleep is how these time travel stories often end with everything returning to normal, or at least a version of normal. There's no real stakes because the show's format demands that the status quo be maintained. Your subconscious picks up on this pattern and relaxes, knowing that no matter how wild the adventure gets, the Griffin family will be okay by morning. Another incredibly soothing topic is the hidden depth of Peter Griffin's character. On the surface, he's just this obnoxious, immature father figure. But when you start examining his backstory, there's surprising emotional complexity. Peter's relationship with his own father, Francis, reveals layers of abandonment issues and the desperate need for approval that drives much of his behavior. The Catholic guilt that shapes Peter's worldview, his struggles with identity, his genuine love for his family despite constantly endangering them, all of this creates this rich psychological portrait. When narrated as bedtime content, Peter's flaws become almost endearing. He's not a bad person, he's just deeply human in the most ridiculous possible way. The show has quietly built this mythology around Peter's various jobs and failures. From working at the brewery to his brief stint as a country music star, each career represents a different aspect of the American dream gone wrong. But instead of being depressing, it's oddly comforting. Peter always bounces back, always finds something new to be enthusiastic about. His resilience becomes this gentle reminder that failure isn't permanent, that there's always another chance to mess things up in new and interesting ways. Lois Griffin's background provides another rich vein of sleep-friendly lore. Her wealthy upbringing, her musical talents, her complicated relationship with her parents, all of this creates this fascinating contrast with her current life. She chose chaos over comfort, love over luxury. When explored in that drowsy, contemplative tone that characterizes good sleep content, Lois becomes this complex figure who represents the compromises we all make for love. The show has revealed that Lois has this incredibly patient, almost saint-like quality that allows her to tolerate Peter's behavior. But occasionally, we see cracks in this facade, moments where her true feelings break through. These glimpses of Lois's inner life become fascinating character studies when presented as gentle bedtime analysis. Meg Griffin represents something even more interesting in the show's mythology. She's the perpetual outsider, the family member who never quite fits in. But when you examine her character closely, she's often the most sensible person in the room. Her isolation isn't really about her being unlikable. It's about her being different, more grounded than the rest of her chaotic family. The psychological dynamics of how the Griffin family treats Meg reveal uncomfortable truths about family structures and social hierarchies. But when explored as sleep content, these observations become philosophical musings rather than harsh critiques. Meg's resilience in the face of constant rejection becomes almost inspiring, a quiet testament to the strength of people who don't fit conventional molds. Chris Griffin's journey through adolescence provides another layer of gentle complexity. His artistic talents, his kind heart, his struggles with self-image, all of this unfolds against the backdrop of typical teenage challenges amplified by his family's dysfunction. Chris represents hope in the Griffin universe, the possibility that the next generation might break free from destructive patterns. The show has developed this subtle running theme about Chris's potential. He's genuinely talented, genuinely caring, but constantly undermined by his environment. When narrated as bedtime content, Chris's story becomes this quiet meditation on nurture versus nature, on how children can maintain their essential goodness despite chaotic circumstances. Brian Griffin deserves special attention because he's arguably the most complex character in the entire series. He's an intellectual trapped in a dog's body, an artist struggling with mediocrity, a liberal idealist living in a conservative household. His pretensions and failures make him simultaneously the most relatable and most frustrating character. Brian's writing career, his romantic relationships, his drinking problem, his philosophical debates with Stewie, all of this creates this rich tapestry of middle-aged disappointment wrapped in surreal comedy. When presented as sleep content, Brian's struggles become universal human experiences filtered through the lens of absurdity. The relationship between Brian and Stewie forms the emotional core of many episodes, and their dynamic has evolved significantly over the show's long run. Early episodes portrayed them as adversaries, but they've developed into this unusual friendship between two intellectuals who understand each other's isolation within the Griffin household. Their conversations, whether they're traveling through time or just sitting in the living room, often touch on profound themes of mortality, purpose, and connection. When these moments are compiled and narrated as bedtime content, they become these surprisingly deep philosophical discussions that naturally lead the mind toward contemplative rest. The supporting characters in Family Guy have developed their own rich backstories that provide endless material for sleep-friendly content. Glenn Quagmire, despite his obvious character flaws, has this complex history as a pilot and adventurer. His relationship with his father, his military service, his various romantic entanglements, all of this creates this surprisingly detailed character study. Cleveland Brown's departure and return to the show created interesting continuity questions that lore enthusiasts love to explore. The dynamics of the friend group, how relationships change over time, how people grow apart and come back together, these themes resonate on a deeper level when explored in that gentle, bedtime storytelling style. Joe Swanson's backstory as a police officer and his adjustment to life in a wheelchair provides material for surprisingly touching character exploration. His determination, his relationship with his family, his role as the moral center of Peter's friend group, all of this unfolds into rich character development that works beautifully as sleep content. The world building in Family Guy extends beyond the main characters to include the town of Quahog itself, the recurring locations, the background characters who appear across multiple episodes, the local politics and social dynamics. All of this creates a lived-in universe that feels surprisingly real despite its cartoon absurdity. The show has developed this consistent internal logic about how Quahog operates, from the local government to the business community to the social hierarchies. When explored as lore content, these details create this comforting sense of a complete world where everything has its place, even if that place is completely ridiculous. Family Guy's relationship with pop culture provides another fascinating avenue for sleep-friendly exploration. The show's countless references and parodies create this massive web of connections to movies, TV shows, music, and historical events. Tracing these references becomes like a gentle intellectual exercise that occupies the mind without overstimulating it. The cultural commentary embedded in these references often reveals surprising insight about American society, entertainment, and human nature. When presented as bedtime analysis, these observations become thoughtful cultural criticism delivered in the most relaxed possible format. The show's approach to continuity creates interesting puzzles for lore enthusiasts. Some episodes clearly exist in the same universe, building on previous events and character development. Others seem to exist in isolation, resetting everything back to a baseline. Understanding which episodes connect and which stand alone becomes this gentle mental exercise, perfect for bedtime. This flexible approach to continuity actually enhances the show's value as sleep content. Unlike serialized dramas where missing details might leave you confused, Family Guy's episodic nature means you can drift in and out of consciousness without losing the thread of what's happening. The animation style and visual, Storytelling and Family Guy contribute to its effectiveness as sleep content. The character designs are simple and comforting. The color palette is warm and familiar, and the pacing of visual jokes follows predictable patterns. Your brain learns to anticipate the rhythm of the show, which naturally promotes relaxation. The voice acting deserves special mention because the performers have developed these characters over decades. The familiarity of these voices creates an immediate sense of comfort and security. Seth MacFarlane's multiple character voices, Alex Borstein as Lois, Mila Kunis as Meg, each voice becomes like a comfortable presence in your bedroom. The musical elements in Family Guy add another layer of sleep-friendly content. The show frequently features elaborate musical numbers that range from Broadway-style productions to simple character songs. These musical interludes often reveal character depths and emotions that regular dialogue might not capture. When compiled as sleep content, these musical moments become like gentle lullabies that showcase different aspects of the characters' personalities. Conway Twitty performances, Stewie's show tunes, Peter's various musical adventures, all of this creates a diverse soundtrack for drifting off to sleep. The show's exploration of family dynamics provides universal themes that resonate regardless of the absurd context. The Griffin family, despite their dysfunction, genuinely cares about each other. Their conflicts and reconciliations follow familiar patterns that most viewers can relate to from their own family experiences. When examined as bedtime content, these family relationships become comforting reminders of the complexity and resilience of human connections. Even when Peter does something incredibly selfish or Stewie plots against his mother, the underlying love and loyalty always reassert themselves. The meta-humor in Family Guy creates another interesting layer for lore exploration. The show frequently acknowledges its own existence as a television program, breaking the fourth wall and commenting on its own production. These moments create this playful relationship between the show and its audience that enhances its value as comfort viewing. Understanding the real-world context behind certain episodes and jokes adds depth to the viewing experience without requiring intense concentration. The show's commentary on television, animation, and entertainment industry becomes gentle insider knowledge that enhances appreciation without demanding active analysis. The evolution of Family Guy over its many seasons provides rich material for comparative analysis. Early episodes had different character dynamics, different humor styles, and different production values. Tracing how the show has changed and developed becomes like following the growth of old friends. This long-term perspective on the series creates a sense of history and continuity that enhances its comfort value. You're not just watching random episodes. You're participating in this ongoing story that has unfolded over decades of real time. The fan community around Family Guy has developed its own theories and interpretations that add layers of meaning to seemingly simple episodes. These fan theories become part of the show's extended lore, creating additional content for exploration and discussion. When presented as bedtime content, these fan interpretations and theories become like bedtime stories shared among friends. They're speculative and playful rather than definitive, which makes them perfect for that drowsy state between wakefulness and sleep. The cultural impact of Family Guy extends beyond entertainment into social commentary and cultural criticism. The show has influenced animation, humor, and television production in measurable ways. Understanding this broader impact adds depth to individual episodes without requiring intense focus. This cultural context becomes another gentle layer of analysis that enhances the viewing experience. You're not just watching cartoons, you're experiencing a significant piece of contemporary American culture that has shaped entertainment and comedy. The merchandising and spin-off content around Family Guy creates additional universe expansion that lore enthusiasts love to explore. Video games, books, merchandise, and related media all contribute to the overall Griffin family mythology. These extensions of the core show become like supplementary reading that enhances understanding without being essential. They're bonus content that rewards dedicated fans while remaining accessible to casual viewers. So there you have it, the surprisingly deep and genuinely soothing world of Family Guy lore designed specifically for sleep. What started as a simple animated comedy has evolved into this rich, complex universe filled with character development, cultural commentary, and surprisingly profound themes about family, friendship, and human nature. The next time you're lying awake at 3 in the morning, scrolling through endless content options, remember that sometimes the most unexpected choices make the best bedtime companions. Peter Griffin's chaotic adventures and Stewie's time travel paradoxes might just be exactly what your brain needs to finally relax and drift off into peaceful sleep. Sweet dreams. And remember, in the multiverse of Family Guy, everything always works out in the end, which is exactly the kind of reassurance we all need before closing our eyes for the night. What if I told you that the chaotic world of Quahog, Rhode Island, holds some of the most intricate storytelling mysteries hidden in plain sight? Tonight, we're diving deep into the sprawling universe of Family Guy, uncovering the hidden lore, forgotten storylines, and interconnected mysteries that make this animated sitcom far more complex than most people realize. So get comfortable, dim those lights, and let me take you on a gentle journey through the surprisingly rich mythology of the Griffin family and their bizarre little town. Let's start with something that might surprise you. Family Guy isn't just a collection of random cutaway gags and crude humor. Beneath all the chaos lies a carefully constructed universe with its own internal logic, recurring themes, and surprisingly deep character development that spans over 2 decades of storytelling. The show has created an entire ecosystem of characters, locations, and running narratives that interweave in ways that become apparent only when you step back and look at the bigger picture. Consider the Griffin family home itself. That modest 2-story house at 31 Spooner Street has witnessed countless adventures, but it's also a character in its own right. The house has its own history, its own secrets, and its own role in the family's story. We've seen glimpses of its past through various episodes, learning about previous owners and the strange events that have occurred within its walls. The basement has served as everything from a secret laboratory to a tornado shelter, while the attic holds forgotten memories and mysterious artifacts from the family's past. Peter Griffin, the family patriarch, represents something far more complex than the typical bumbling father figure. His character arc across hundreds of episodes reveals a man struggling with responsibility, identity, and his place in the world. His various jobs throughout the series aren't just random plot devices, they're explorations of the American, working-class experience. From his time at the toy factory, to his stint as a fisherman, from his brief career as a bodyguard, to his adventures in television production. Peter's employment history tells a story about economic uncertainty and the changing nature of work in modern America. The relationship between Peter and his father-in-law, Carter Pewterschmidt, opens up entire storylines about class, wealth, and family dynamics. Carter represents old money, established power, and traditional values, while Peter embodies working-class sensibilities and anti-establishment attitudes. Their ongoing conflict reflects broader cultural tensions about privilege, success, and what it means to be a man in contemporary society. The episodes focusing on their relationship often reveal deeper truths about both characters, showing us sides of Peter we rarely see, and humanizing Carter beyond his role as the wealthy antagonist. Lois Griffin's character development represents one of the show's most subtle long-term storytelling achievements. Initially presented as the patient, long-suffering wife, Lois has evolved into a complex character with her own ambitions, frustrations, and moral complexities. Her musical background, her brief career as a model, her struggles with motherhood, and her occasional dark turns all contribute to a character portrait that's far richer than it appears on the surface. The episodes that focus on Lois often explore themes of unfulfilled potential, the sacrifices women make for family, and the tension between personal desires and social expectations. The children of the Griffin family each represent different aspects of growing up in modern America. Meg's role as the family scapegoat initially seems cruel, but viewed through a longer lens, her character arc becomes a meditation on adolescence, social acceptance, and finding one's place in the world. Her various attempts to fit in, her brief moments of triumph, and her resilience in the face of constant rejection tell a story about teenage life that's both exaggerated and surprisingly authentic. The episodes where Meg finally stands up for herself or finds temporary happiness hit differently when you understand the full context of her journey. Chris Griffin's character explores themes of masculinity, creativity, and coming of age. His artistic talents, his awkward social interactions, and his relationship with his father create a narrative about growing up different in a world that values conformity. The episodes that focus on Chris often deal with sensitive topics like bullying, self-expression, and the pressure to live up to expectations. His friendship with Herbert, the elderly neighbor, creates uncomfortable comedy, but also touches on themes of loneliness and the generation gap. Then there's Stewie Griffin, perhaps the most complex character in the entire series. His evolution from would-be world conqueror to sophisticated intellectual represents one of the most significant character developments in animated television. Stewie's relationship with Brian, his adventures through time and space, and his gradual coming to terms with his own identity create storylines that are simultaneously hilarious and surprisingly moving. The episodes that focus on Stewie often push the boundaries of what's possible in the Family Guy universe, introducing science fiction elements, philosophical discussions, and emotional depth that contrasts sharply with the show's typical tone. Brian Griffin serves as the show's moral center and intellectual conscience, but he's also deeply flawed in ways that make him more human than many actual human characters. His struggles with alcoholism, his pretentious intellectual posturing, his complicated romantic relationships, and his role as the family's voice of reason create a character who's simultaneously admirable and infuriating. The episodes that explore Brian's background, his relationship with his own identity as a talking dog, and his place in human society often serve as vehicles for social commentary and philosophical exploration. The town of Quahog itself is a character worthy of deep exploration. This fictional Rhode Island community has its own ecosystem of recurring characters, local institutions, and cultural traditions. The Drunken Clam serves as more than just Peter's favorite bar. It's a gathering place where working-class philosophy gets hashed out over beer and conversation. Jerome, the bartender, represents stability and wisdom in a world of chaos. The regular patrons each have their own stories and perspectives that contribute to the show's exploration of community and belonging. Quahog's local government, represented by Mayor Adam West, creates storylines that satirize American politics while also celebrating the absurdity of civic life. Mayor West's bizarre policies, his strange obsessions, and his genuine care for his constituents create a character who's simultaneously incompetent and oddly effective. The episodes dealing with local politics often reveal truths about democracy, leadership, and the relationship between citizens and their government. The show's approach to religion and spirituality, primarily explored through the Griffin family's relationship with their local church and various religious figures, creates ongoing narratives about faith, morality, and community. These storylines often challenge both religious orthodoxy and secular assumptions, creating space for nuanced discussions about belief and practice in modern American life. Family Guy's use of cutaway gags isn't just random humor, it's a storytelling technique that allows the show to explore ideas and scenarios that wouldn't fit into the main narrative. These brief vignettes often comment on historical events, pop culture phenomena, and social issues in ways that are both entertaining and insightful. The cumulative effect of hundreds of these cutaways creates a comprehensive commentary on American culture and society. The show's relationship with popular culture goes beyond simple parody. The various celebrity appearances, pop culture references, and media satires create a running commentary on fame, entertainment, and the role of media in modern life. Episodes that focus on Peter's brief brush with celebrity or Brian's attempts at literary fame explore themes about success, authenticity, and the price of public recognition. The recurring characters in Family Guy's universe each contribute to the show's exploration of different aspects of American life. Glenn Quagmire represents unchecked masculinity and sexual liberation, but episodes that delve deeper into his character reveal a more complex individual struggling with his own demons and desires. Cleveland Brown's friendship with Peter and his eventual move to his own spin-off series created storylines about race, friendship, and community that the show handled with surprising sensitivity. The show's treatment of disability, primarily through the character of Joe Swanson, creates ongoing narratives about resilience, adaptation, and the challenges faced by people with disabilities in American society. Joe's character development over the series shows him as a fully realized individual whose disability is just one aspect of his identity, not its defining characteristic. Family Guy's exploration of family dynamics extends beyond the immediate Griffin household to include the extended family members who appear throughout the series. Peter's relationship with his father Mickey, Lois's complex feelings about her parents, and the various relatives who drift in and out of episodes create a broader picture of how families function, dysfunction, and evolve over time. The show's handling of death and mortality, from the controversial killing and resurrection of Brian to the various deaths of minor characters throughout the series, creates ongoing meditations on loss, grief, and the meaning of life. These episodes often reveal the deep emotional connections between characters that might not be apparent in more comedic episodes. The science fiction elements that creep into Family Guy through Stewie's inventions and time travel adventures create opportunities for the show to explore philosophical questions about destiny, free will, and the nature of reality. The episodes dealing with alternate timelines and parallel universes suggest that the Family Guy universe is far more complex and interconnected than it initially appears. The show's treatment of education, primarily through the various school episodes and Chris and Meg's academic experiences, creates commentary on the American educational system, social hierarchies among young people, and the challenges of growing up in contemporary society. These storylines often reveal the ways that institutional structures both support and fail young people. Family Guy's exploration of work and economic life through Peter's various jobs and the family's financial struggles creates ongoing commentary about class, opportunity, and the American dream. The episodes that focus on economic hardship often reveal the ways that financial stress affects family relationships and individual well-being. The show's approach to mental health, explored through various characters' psychological struggles and Brian's role as unofficial family therapist, creates space for discussions about depression, anxiety, and the importance of mental health care. These storylines often handle serious topics with both humor and genuine sensitivity. As we wrap up this journey through the hidden depths of Family Guy's universe, it's worth noting that this exploration only scratches the surface of the rich storytelling possibilities contained within this seemingly simple animated comedy. The show's ability to balance crude humor with genuine emotional depth, social commentary with pure entertainment, and chaos with carefully constructed narrative arcs makes it a unique achievement in television comedy. The next time you watch an episode of Family Guy, try looking beyond the surface humor to see the deeper stories being told. Notice how character relationships evolve over time, how running gags develop new meanings in different contexts, and how the show uses its absurdist elements to explore very real human experiences and social issues. Sweet dreams, and remember that sometimes the most profound truths are hidden in the most unexpected places, even in the chaotic world of Quahog, Rhode Island. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled twice by Fox and nearly became lost media forever? Or that Seth MacFarlane almost died in the September 11th attacks but missed his flight because of a hangover? Welcome to the bizarre, twisted, and absolutely fascinating world of Family Guy lore that most fans have never heard about. I'm talking about secrets so wild that they make the show's most outrageous episodes look tame by comparison. We're diving deep into the creation myths, the behind-the-scenes drama, the near-death experiences, and the corporate battles that shaped one of television's most controversial animated series. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never watch Family Guy the same way again. Let's start with something that will blow your mind. Seth MacFarlane, the creator and voice of Peter Griffin, Brian, and Stewie, was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 1-1 on September 11th, 2001. That's right, the same flight that crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. But here's the crazy part. He overslept because he was hungover from a party the night before and his travel agent had given him the wrong departure time. If he had made that flight, Family Guy would never have existed beyond its first season, and animation history would be completely different. But that's just the beginning of this incredible story. Family Guy has one of the most bizarre resurrection tales in television history. The show premiered in 1999 and was actually performing decently in the ratings, but Fox kept moving it around to different time slots. You know how networks love to do that, right? Well, they moved it so many times that viewers couldn't keep track of when it was on. Eventually, Fox canceled it in 2002 after just 3 seasons. Here's where it gets interesting, though. While the show was dead on television, something magical was happening in the afterlife. Adult Swim picked up the syndication rights and started airing reruns late at night. College students and young adults discovered the show and fell in love with it. At the same time, DVD sales were going through the roof. The first season DVD became one of the best-selling TV show DVDs of all time, and suddenly Fox realized they had made a massive mistake. So in 2005, Fox did something almost unprecedented in television history. They brought back a canceled show based purely on DVD sales and cable reruns. Family Guy became the first show ever to be revived solely because of its success in syndication and home video. It was like watching a TV show literally rise from the dead. But the resurrection story gets even weirder. When Fox brought the show back, they didn't just order a few episodes to test the waters. They ordered 53 new episodes right off the bat. That's an enormous vote of confidence for a show that had already been canceled once. Seth MacFarlane suddenly went from unemployed animator to one of the most powerful people in Hollywood practically overnight. Now let's talk about the creative origins of the show, because they're absolutely fascinating. Seth MacFarlane created Family Guy when he was just 24 years old, fresh out of the Rhode Island School of Design. But here's what most people don't know. The show was originally pitched as a much more traditional family sitcom. The early concepts were way more grounded and realistic than what we ended up with. The character of Peter Griffin was originally going to be much more like a typical TV dad, still bumbling and overweight, but not the complete psychopath we know and love today. Stewie wasn't even going to be particularly smart or evil in the original concept. He was just going to be a regular baby with maybe slightly advanced vocabulary. Brian was going to be a normal dog who occasionally made witty observations but wasn't going to be a full conversation partner for the family. What changed everything was Seth MacFarlane's love of old Hollywood and classic animation. He grew up watching Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry, and classic Disney cartoons, and he wanted to bring that level of visual comedy and surreal humor to primetime television. The problem was that most networks were terrified of anything too weird or experimental. Fox, however, was in a unique position in the late 90s. The Simpsons had proven that animated shows could work in prime time, but Fox was still considered the edgy, rebellious network. They were willing to take risks that ABC, CBS, and NBC would never consider. So when Seth pitched his cartoon about a dysfunctional family in Rhode Island, Fox was intrigued enough to order a pilot. The pilot episode is actually incredibly different from the show we know today. The animation style was cruder, the jokes were more straightforward, and the characters hadn't yet developed their extreme personalities. If you watch that original pilot, you can barely recognize it as the same show. It's like looking at baby photos of a celebrity. You can kind of see the resemblance, but it's clearly a work in progress. One of the most fascinating aspects of Family Guy's development is how the characters evolved over time. Take Stewie, for example. In the early seasons, he was genuinely trying to kill Lois and take over the world. His evil schemes were the driving force behind many episodes. But as the show went on, the writers realized that Stewie was funnier when he was dealing with more relatable problems, like sexuality, relationships, and growing up. This evolution wasn't accidental. It reflected Seth MacFarlane's own growth as a writer and person. When he created Stewie, MacFarlane was a young, single guy who thought evil baby plots were hilarious. But as he got older and more experienced, he realized that character-driven comedy was more sustainable than pure shock value. The same thing happened with Brian. Originally, he was just the voice of reason in the Griffin household, the one sane character who could comment on everyone else's craziness. But over time, the writers started exploring Brian's flaws and insecurities, turning him into one of the most complex characters on television. His pretentiousness, his failed writing career, his drinking problem, all of these traits developed organically as the show matured. Speaking of character development, let's talk about some of the inspiration behind the Griffin family. Peter Griffin was actually based on a security guard that Seth MacFarlane worked with during a summer job. The guy was loud, obnoxious, and completely inappropriate, but somehow lovable at the same time. MacFarlane found himself fascinated by how someone could be so offensive, yet still maintain friendships and a family. Lois was inspired by MacFarlane's own mother, but also by the classic TV mom archetype. The twist was making her come from a wealthy family, which allowed the writers to explore themes of class and privilege. It also gave them an excuse to put the Griffins in situations they normally couldn't afford, like fancy parties and expensive vacations. The supporting characters have equally interesting origins. Glenn Quagmire was originally supposed to be a minor character who appeared in maybe 1 or 2 episodes, but Seth MacFarlane's voice performance was so distinctive and memorable that the writers kept bringing him back. The giggity giggity catchphrase wasn't even scripted. MacFarlane improvised it during recording, and everyone thought it was so funny that they made it Quagmire's signature sound. Cleveland Brown started as a simple background character, but MacFarlane realized that having a calm, reasonable neighbor made Peter's craziness even funnier by contrast. The character became so popular that he eventually got his own spin-off show, though that's a whole other story of corporate politics and creative struggles. One of the most controversial aspects of Family Guy is its use of cutaway gags, those random flashbacks that have nothing to do with the main plot. Some critics hate them, calling them lazy writing and cheap laughs. But here's the thing. Those cutaways were actually inspired by some of the most sophisticated comedy ever created. Seth MacFarlane grew up watching Monty Python's Flying Circus, and he was fascinated by how the Pythons would interrupt their sketches with completely random animations and non sequiturs. He also loved the Marx Brothers movies, where the plot would screech to a halt for a musical number or a bizarre comedy bit that had nothing to do with anything else. The cutaway gags serve a specific purpose in Family Guy's comedy structure. They allow the writers to do jokes that would be impossible within the constraints of a normal sitcom plot. Want to make fun of a celebrity or reference an obscure movie? Just have Peter say, "This reminds me of the time I," and cut to whatever crazy scenario you can imagine. But here's something most fans don't realize. Many of those cutaways are actually incredibly expensive to produce. Each one requires new character designs, new backgrounds, new voice acting, and sometimes even new music. A single 30-second cutaway can cost more to animate than an entire scene of regular dialogue. Fox executives were initially horrified by how much money the show was spending on these seemingly throwaway jokes. The financial aspect of Family Guy is actually one of the most interesting parts of its story. When the show first premiered, animation was still considered a niche market for adults. The Simpsons was successful, but it was seen as a unique exception rather than proof that there was a broader market for animated comedy. Family Guy's success helped prove that there was actually a huge appetite for adult animated shows. This paved the way for series like American Dad, The Cleveland Show, Archer, Rick and Morty, and countless others. Without Family Guy's commercial success, the entire landscape of adult animation might look completely different today. The merchandising aspect is equally fascinating. Family Guy products generate hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue every year. T-shirts, toys, video games, Christmas ornaments, you name it, and there's probably a Family Guy version of it. The Stewie character alone has spawned an entire industry of baby-themed merchandise with surprisingly dark humor. But perhaps the most interesting aspect of Family Guy's cultural impact is how it changed the way we think about offensive comedy. The show pushes boundaries that would have been unthinkable on television even 10 years before it premiered. Yet somehow, it manages to get away with jokes that would destroy other shows. The secret is in the show's self-awareness. Family Guy knows that it's offensive, and it's constantly making jokes about its own offensiveness. When Peter does something terrible, the other characters usually call him out on it. When the show makes a controversial reference, it often follows it up with a joke about how inappropriate the reference was. This meta-humor creates a kind of protective bubble around the show's more controversial content. Viewers understand that they're not supposed to take Peter Griffin seriously as a role model. He's clearly meant to be a cautionary tale about what happens when someone has no filter and no self-awareness. The voice acting on Family Guy deserves its own deep dive because it's honestly incredible. Seth MacFarlane voices 4 of the main characters: Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire, plus dozens of supporting characters and celebrity impersonations. His range is absolutely mind-blowing when you really think about it. But here's what's even more impressive. MacFarlane often records conversations between his own characters. That means he's essentially having entire dramatic scenes with himself, switching between voices and maintaining the emotional continuity of multiple characters simultaneously. It's like watching a one-man theater performance every time you see Peter and Brian have a heart-to-heart conversation. The other voice actors are equally talented. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois, also does dozens of supporting characters, including the Griffin's maid Consuela. Mila Kunis took over the voice of Meg after the first season, and her performance evolved from simple teenager dialogue to some of the show's most emotionally complex moments. Seth Green voices Chris Griffin, and his portrayal perfectly captures that awkward teenage energy. Green actually ad-libs a lot of Chris's dialogue, particularly the character's weird sound effects and random observations. Many of Chris's funniest moments come from Green just improvising during recording sessions. The show's relationship with Fox has always been complicated and fascinating. On one hand, Family Guy makes enormous amounts of money for the network. On the other hand, it constantly creates controversy and pushes the boundaries of what's acceptable on broadcast television. There have been numerous instances where Fox executives have asked the writers to tone down certain jokes or storylines. Sometimes the writers comply, but often they find creative ways to work around the censorship. This has led to some incredibly clever wordplay and visual innuendo that's actually funnier than whatever the original joke was going to be. The international success of Family Guy is another interesting chapter in its story. The show airs in dozens of countries around the world, and each market has its own unique censorship challenges. Some countries cut entire scenes, while others dub over offensive dialogue with completely different jokes. In some markets, Stewie's sexuality is completely removed from his character arc. In others, references to religion or politics are heavily edited. This has created dozens of different versions of the show, each tailored to local sensitivities and cultural norms. Looking at Family Guy's legacy today, it's clear that the show fundamentally changed television comedy. It proved that audiences were hungry for more experimental, boundary-pushing content. It showed that animation could be a vehicle for sophisticated adult humor, not just children's entertainment. The show also pioneered many techniques that are now standard in comedy writing. The use of pop culture references as comedic shorthand, the mixing of high and low culture, the willingness to completely abandon plot for the sake of a good joke. These are all techniques that you can see in countless comedies today. But perhaps most importantly, Family Guy proved that television shows could have multiple lives. The fact that it survived cancellation and came back stronger than ever showed other creators that there were new paths to success beyond traditional network approval. As we wrap up this deep dive into Family Guy lore, it's worth noting that the show is still evolving and changing. Seth MacFarlane has stepped back from day-to-day involvement to focus on other projects, but the show continues under new leadership. Each season brings new controversies, new characters, and new ways to push the boundaries of what's possible on television. Whether you love it or hate it, Family Guy has left an indelible mark on popular culture. It's a show that dared to be different, survived multiple attempts to kill it, and emerged as one of the most successful and influential comedies of the modern era. And honestly, that's pretty giggity if you ask me. Did you know that Family Guy was actually dead and buried for 3 entire years? And when it came back from the grave, it changed television forever in ways you probably never realized? Stick around because what I'm about to tell you about the hidden depths of Family Guy will completely change how you see this seemingly simple cartoon. Most people think Family Guy is just random jokes and cutaway gags. But there's a secret layer of storytelling, hidden references, and behind-the-scenes drama that would make your head spin. From secret government conspiracies to real-world tragedies that shaped entire episodes, this show has more dark secrets than you might imagine. Let's start with something that sounds like a conspiracy theory, but is absolutely true. Family Guy predicted major world events with scary accuracy. And I'm not talking about lucky guesses. We're talking about specific details that aired months or even years before they actually happened in real life. Remember the episode where Peter accidentally damages a bridge? That episode aired in 2005, showing a bridge collapse in remarkable detail. Less than 2 years later, the Minneapolis bridge collapse happened in almost identical circumstances. Coincidence? Maybe. But wait, there's more. The show also depicted airport security scenarios that became reality after major policy changes. Episodes showing specific security procedures aired before those exact procedures were implemented in real airports. Either Seth MacFarlane is a time traveler, or the writers were paying very close attention to patterns most people missed. But here's where it gets really weird. The show once depicted a very specific type of terrorist attack involving planes, and this aired before certain real-world events that I can't get too detailed about without this video getting demonetized. The point is, Family Guy wasn't just making random jokes about current events. They were somehow tapping into the collective unconscious of what was coming next. Now let's talk about the show's death and resurrection, because this story is wilder than any episode plot. Family Guy was canceled in 2002 after just 3 seasons. Fox executives thought it was done forever, but here's what they didn't expect. The DVD sales went absolutely insane. People were buying Family Guy DVDs like crazy, and more importantly, Adult Swim started running reruns that pulled in massive ratings. Fox realized they had made a huge mistake. The show wasn't just popular, it was building a cult following that was growing stronger every day it was off the air. When Family Guy came back in 2005, something had fundamentally changed. The writers knew they had been given a second chance, and they went absolutely wild with it. The humor got darker, the references got more obscure, and they started breaking the fourth wall in ways that no animated show had ever done before. But here's the part that most fans don't know. The cancellation and resurrection created a split personality within the show itself. There's pre-cancellation Family Guy and post-cancellation Family Guy, and they're almost like 2 different shows entirely. Pre-cancellation Family Guy was more grounded. Sure, it was weird, but the characters felt like real people with real problems. Post-cancellation Family Guy became something else entirely. It became a commentary on television itself, a show that was constantly aware it was a show. This shift created what television historians now call the meta-revolution. Family Guy showed other animated shows that you could break every rule, reference your own existence, and make fun of the very network that pays you and still be successful. South Park, Rick and Morty, and countless other shows followed this blueprint. Speaking of breaking rules, let's talk about the episodes that almost didn't make it to air. There's a whole vault of Family Guy content that was deemed too controversial, too dark, or too legally problematic to broadcast. Some of these episodes have become legendary among fans who have never seen them. One infamous episode dealt with a real-world tragedy in such a specific way that it would have caused massive backlash. The episode was fully animated, voiced, and scored, but it was pulled at the last minute. Only a handful of people have ever seen it, and they're bound by non-disclosure agreements. Another banned episode featured a storyline that involved real political figures in scenarios that would have caused international incidents. The legal department shut it down so hard that even mentioning specific details could result in lawsuits. But here's what's fascinating about these banned episodes. They show just how far Seth MacFarlane and his team were willing to push boundaries. They weren't just making a cartoon. They were conducting social experiments to see what society would tolerate. This brings us to one of the most interesting aspects of Family Guy lore: the show's relationship with censorship and standards. Every episode that makes it to air represents hundreds of battles fought behind the scenes between the writers and network executives. The writers developed an elaborate system for getting controversial content past the censors. They would intentionally include material they knew would be rejected, so that when they fought to keep the stuff they really wanted, it would seem reasonable by comparison. It's psychological warfare disguised as comedy writing. This strategy worked so well that other shows started copying it. The Family Guy approach to dealing with censorship became the industry standard for pushing boundaries on television. Now let's dive into the character origins, because the backstories of these characters are way darker and more complex than you'd expect from a comedy show. Peter Griffin wasn't always the lovable idiot we know today. In early concept art and scripts, he was genuinely disturbing, almost psychopathic in his behavior. The writers had to gradually soften Peter's character because test audiences found him genuinely unlikable. But traces of that original darker Peter still show up in certain episodes, creating this weird cognitive dissonance where you're laughing at someone who, if you really think about it, should probably be in prison. Stewie's character evolution is even more interesting. He was originally conceived as a pure villain, a baby bent on world domination with no redeeming qualities. But as the show progressed, the writers started exploring what would make a baby want to destroy everything, and they discovered something profound about childhood trauma and family dynamics. The gradual softening of Stewie from villain to complex character represents one of the most sophisticated character development arcs in television comedy. But it happens so slowly that most viewers didn't even notice it was happening. Brian's character might be the most tragic of all. He represents the writer's own struggles with depression, alcoholism, and the feeling of being trapped in a life that doesn't match your dreams. Every time Brian has an existential crisis, it's the writers working through their own psychological issues on screen. This is why Brian's temporary death hit fans so hard. It wasn't just killing off a character, it was the writers symbolically killing off the part of themselves that they saw in Brian. When they brought him back, it represented their own decision to keep fighting through depression and creative frustration. The show's relationship with its own success is another layer of complexity that most fans miss. Family Guy became so popular that it started influencing real-world culture, but this success created a feedback loop that began changing the show itself. References to Family Guy started showing up in other TV shows, movies, and even news broadcasts. Politicians started making Family Guy references in speeches. The show went from commenting on culture to actually shaping culture, and this shift is reflected in the later seasons. The writers became increasingly aware that they were creating cultural touchstones, and this awareness changed how they approached comedy. Jokes that might have been throwaway gags in early seasons became carefully crafted cultural commentary in later seasons. This evolution created what media scholars call the recursive effect, where a piece of media becomes so influential that it starts commenting on its own influence. Family Guy didn't just break the fourth wall, it demolished the entire theater. Let's talk about the real-world consequences of Family Guy's cultural impact. The show has been credited with changing how people communicate, particularly in how they use pop culture references in everyday conversation. Before Family Guy, pop culture references in conversation were usually recent and obvious. After Family Guy, people started making increasingly obscure references, creating entire conversations that were essentially elaborate chains of cultural callbacks. This changed how humor works in social situations. The show also influenced how other media uses cutaway gags and non sequiturs. Everything from commercials to political campaigns started using Family Guy-style random humor to grab attention and create memorable moments. But perhaps the most significant impact was on censorship standards across all media. Family Guy pushed boundaries so consistently and successfully that it expanded what was considered acceptable on television. Shows that came after could go places that wouldn't have been possible before Family Guy paved the way. The voice acting in Family Guy deserves its own deep dive because there are layers of performance art happening that most people completely miss. Seth MacFarlane doesn't just voice multiple characters. He creates distinct psychological profiles for each voice that reflect different aspects of his own personality. Peter represents 10. MacFarlane's id, his impulse-driven, consequence-ignoring side. Brian represents his superego, his intellectual, morally concerned side. Stewie represents his ego, his ambitious, attention-seeking side. The show is essentially one person having a conversation with different aspects of himself. This psychological complexity extends to the guest voices as well. When celebrities appear on Family Guy, they're not just doing celebrity cameos. They're being integrated into this complex psychological ecosystem that MacFarlane has created. The show's approach to celebrity culture is particularly sophisticated. Rather than just making fun of celebrities, Family Guy examines the psychological impact of fame on both celebrities and the people who consume celebrity culture. This brings us to one of the most overlooked aspects of Family Guy, its commentary on media consumption itself. The show constantly references other TV shows, movies, and cultural phenomena, but it's not just making references for the sake of references. Each reference serves as a commentary on how media shapes our understanding of reality. When Peter acts out scenes from movies, he's demonstrating how deeply fictional narratives penetrate real human behavior. When the show parodies other TV shows, it's examining how different formats and styles influence how we process information. The cutaway gags aren't random interruptions. They're demonstrations of how the human mind actually works. We don't think in linear narratives. We think in associations, tangents, and random connections. Family Guy mirrors the actual structure of human consciousness. This psychological accuracy is why the show resonates so deeply with audiences. It's not just funny, it's cognitively familiar. The chaos of Family Guy matches the chaos of our own internal mental experience. The show's treatment of social issues is another area where there's more depth than meets the eye. While Family Guy often appears to make jokes at the expense of sensitive topics, careful analysis reveals a more complex approach to social commentary. The show uses humor to make serious points more palatable, but it also uses humor to expose the absurdity of certain social attitudes. When characters make prejudiced statements, they're usually portrayed as idiotic or ignorant, effectively undermining the attitudes they're expressing. This technique allows the show to address controversial topics without preaching, but it also creates ambiguity about what the show actually believes. This ambiguity is intentional, forcing viewers to think critically about the issues being presented rather than passively accepting predetermined conclusions. As we wrap up this exploration of Family Guy's hidden depths, it's worth considering what this all means for the future of comedy in television. Family Guy didn't just entertain audiences. It fundamentally changed what television could be and do. The show proved that audiences were hungry for more complex, self-aware entertainment that challenged traditional narrative structures. It demonstrated that comedy could be a vehicle for serious psychological and social exploration without losing its entertainment value. Most importantly, Family Guy showed that taking creative risks, even when they result in cancellation, can ultimately lead to greater success than playing it safe. The show's death and resurrection became a template for how creative properties can find new life through changing audience behaviors and consumption patterns. So the next time you watch Family Guy, remember that you're not just watching a cartoon about a dysfunctional family. You're watching a sophisticated piece of media art that changed television forever, influenced how we communicate with each other, and continues to push boundaries in ways that most viewers never fully appreciate. The real genius of Family Guy isn't in any single joke or episode. It's in how it managed to hide all this complexity behind what appears to be simple, silly humor. That's the ultimate magic trick, and it's still working after all these years. Have you ever wondered what makes Family Guy the perfect show to fall asleep to? Tonight, we're diving deep into the wonderfully weird world of Quahog to uncover some fascinating facts that might just help you understand why millions of people drift off to this animated chaos every single night. But first, let me ask you something. What if I told you that the baby genius who plots world domination actually has one of the most tragic character arcs in television history? Or that there's a scientific reason why Peter Griffin's voice might be the ultimate sleep aid? Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll never look at your bedtime Family Guy marathon the same way again. Let's start with something that'll blow your mind. Stewie Griffin, that diabolical infant with the posh British accent, wasn't always the character we know today. In the original concept, he was supposed to be much darker and more sinister. The show's creator, Seth MacFarlane, initially envisioned him as a genuinely evil character whose plans would occasionally succeed. But here's the fascinating part that most fans don't realize. Stewie's entire personality is built on a foundation of insecurity and loneliness that makes him oddly relatable, especially during those late-night viewing sessions when you're feeling a bit isolated yourself. The genius baby's accent tells us everything we need to know about human psychology. In one of the show's most revealing moments, Stewie admits in therapy that his British accent is completely fake. He adopted it to sound smarter and more sophisticated than everyone around him. It's essentially vocal armor designed to protect his vulnerable core. This resonates with so many viewers because we all put on masks to hide our insecurities. When you're lying in bed at 3 in the morning, there's something comforting about a character who's also struggling with authenticity. But here's where it gets really interesting. The show deliberately keeps it ambiguous whether other characters can actually understand Stewie. Sometimes they respond to him. Sometimes, they completely ignore his elaborate monologues about world domination. This creates a dreamlike quality that perfectly mirrors the state between waking and sleeping. Your brain doesn't have to work too hard to follow rigid logic because the show itself operates on dream logic. Speaking of dream logic, let's talk about the show's relationship with time and reality. Family Guy is famous for its cutaway gags that transport viewers to completely different scenarios mid-episode. One moment Peter is arguing with Lois about dinner. The next moment we're watching a historical flashback about Napoleon's bathroom habits. These rapid shifts in context actually mimic the way our minds work when we're falling asleep, jumping from thought to thought without linear connection. The show's approach to continuity is another sleep-inducing factor. Characters die and come back to life, major events get completely forgotten by the next episode, and the family somehow never ages despite running for over 2 decades. This lack of consequences creates a safe space for your mind. You don't need to worry about emotional investment or following complex storylines. It's mental comfort food. Now let's examine the voice acting, because this is where the science gets really interesting. Seth MacFarlane voices multiple main characters, including Peter, Brian, and Stewie. The consistency of hearing the same vocal patterns creates a subconscious sense of familiarity and safety. Peter's voice in particular has a rhythmic, almost hypnotic quality that many sleep specialists would recognize as naturally soothing. The slight nasal tone and steady pacing can actually help regulate breathing patterns. Brian Griffin represents something unique in the Family Guy universe. As the talking dog who serves as the show's voice of reason, he often delivers philosophical observations and cultural commentary. But here's what makes him perfect for sleep viewing. His conversations with Stewie frequently dive into existential topics without becoming too heavy or anxiety-provoking. They discuss the meaning of life, mortality, and purpose in ways that feel profound but never overwhelming. It's like having a gentle philosophical discussion as you drift off to sleep. The show's approach to controversial topics is surprisingly sophisticated when you analyze it from a sleep psychology perspective. While Family Guy is known for pushing boundaries, it does so in such an over-the-top way that it becomes almost cartoonish rather than genuinely disturbing. This allows viewers to process difficult subjects without the emotional intensity that would keep them awake. It's social commentary wrapped in enough absurdity to feel safe. Let's dive into the Griffin family dynamics, because they reveal something fascinating about comfort viewing. Despite all their dysfunction, the family always comes back together by the end of each episode. Peter might do something incredibly stupid. Lois might lose her temper. Meg might face another humiliation, but they remain a unit. This predictable structure provides emotional security. No matter how chaotic things get, you know everything will essentially reset by the next episode. The show's treatment of Meg Griffin deserves special attention. As the perpetually misunderstood teenager who faces constant rejection and ridicule, she represents the part of ourselves we're most insecure about. But the show's portrayal of her suffering is so exaggerated that it becomes therapeutic rather than depressing. It's like having your own adolescent anxieties reflected back to you in such an extreme way that they lose their power to hurt you. Chris Griffin, the dim-witted but kind-hearted son, provides another layer of comfort. His innocence and genuine sweetness create moments of unexpected warmth throughout the show. When everything else is cynical and sarcastic, Chris offers glimpses of pure, uncomplicated emotion. These moments work like pressure valves, releasing tension just when the cynicism might become overwhelming. The show's relationship with pop culture creates a unique viewing experience that's perfect for repeat watching. The references span decades, from obscure 70s television shows to current internet memes. This means different jokes land differently depending on your age, mood, and current knowledge base. You can watch the same episode multiple times and discover new layers, but the discovery process is gentle and rewarding rather than demanding. Family Guy's animation style contributes to its sleep friendliness in subtle but important ways. The character designs are simple and rounded, avoiding sharp angles or jarring visual elements that might startle viewers. The color palette is warm and familiar, dominated by the cozy yellows and browns of the Griffin home. Even during action sequences or fantastical cutaways, the visual style remains consistent and non-threatening. The show's musical elements deserve recognition too. From Stewie and Brian's elaborate musical numbers to Peter's improvised songs, music is woven throughout the series in ways that create rhythm and flow. These musical interludes often serve as natural breaking points, giving your brain permission to zone out or drift away. The songs are catchy enough to be memorable, but rarely complex enough to demand active listening. One of the most brilliant aspects of Family Guy's sleep appeal is its relationship with repetition. The show has been running for so long that certain gags and character interactions have become ritualistic. Peter fighting the giant chicken, Stewie's elaborate revenge plots against Lois, Brian's pretentious literary aspirations. These recurring elements create a sense of familiarity that can be deeply comforting for regular viewers. The show's approach to violence is another key factor. While there's plenty of cartoon violence, it's always presented in such an unrealistic way that it never feels genuinely threatening. Characters get blown up, shot, crushed, and dismembered, only to appear completely fine in the next scene. This consequence-free violence allows viewers to experience excitement and tension without any lasting anxiety. Let's talk about the show's treatment of mortality, because this might be the most important element for sleep viewing. Death appears frequently in Family Guy, but it's always treated as either temporary or comedic rather than genuinely tragic. Characters die and return, discuss death casually, and face mortal peril without real consequences. For viewers dealing with their own mortality anxieties, especially late at night, this approach can be surprisingly therapeutic. The writing style of Family Guy creates a unique rhythm that mirrors natural sleep patterns. Episodes often start with high-energy scenarios that gradually wind down through various subplots and cutaways. By the time you reach the resolution, the pacing has naturally slowed, making it easier to transition into actual sleep. It's like the show is designed to help you power down. Family Guy's relationship with nostalgia is complex and comforting. The show constantly references and parodies elements from decades past, creating a sense of collective cultural memory. Whether it's a reference to an 80s movie, a 70s television show, or a 90s commercial, these callbacks create connections to simpler times. For many viewers, this nostalgic element provides emotional comfort that eases the transition to sleep. The show's approach to relationships and romance offers another layer of sleep-friendly content. Despite all the dysfunction and crude humor, there are genuine moments of love and connection between characters. Peter and Lois, despite their constant conflicts, clearly love each other. Stewie and Brian, despite their differences, have formed an everyday, unlikely but deep friendship. These relationship dynamics provide emotional warmth without demanding too much investment. Here's something most people don't realize about Family Guy's structure. The show operates on multiple levels of engagement. You can watch it as pure background noise, letting the familiar voices and music wash over you. You can engage with the surface-level humor and sight gags. Or you can dive deep into the cultural references and character development. This flexibility makes it perfect for different stages of falling asleep. The show's treatment of everyday situations is particularly sleep-friendly. Many episodes revolve around mundane domestic issues like household chores, neighbor disputes, or family dinners that somehow spiral into elaborate adventures. But no matter how wild things get, they always return to the familiar setting of the Griffin home. This creates a sense of adventure within safety, excitement within security. Family Guy's approach to current events and social issues provides another comfort layer. The show comments on politics, social trends, and cultural phenomena, but always through the lens of cartoon absurdity. This allows viewers to engage with real-world concerns without the anxiety that usually accompanies such topics. It's like having a pressure release valve for contemporary stress. The show's episodic nature means you never have to worry about missing crucial plot developments if you fall asleep mid-episode. While there are occasionally multi-part episodes or recurring storylines, the vast majority of episodes are self-contained. This removes the anxiety about keeping up with complex narratives and allows your mind to relax completely. As we wrap up this deep dive into why Family Guy has become the ultimate sleep companion for millions of viewers, remember that comfort viewing is a deeply personal experience. What works for one person might not work for another, but there's something undeniably special about a show that can make you laugh, think, and ultimately feel at peace, all within the span of 22 minutes. The genius of Family Guy as a sleep aid lies in its perfect balance of engagement and relaxation. It's stimulating enough to occupy your conscious mind and prevent anxious thoughts from taking over, but familiar and comforting enough to allow your subconscious to begin the journey towards sleep. Whether you're drawn to Stewie's elaborate schemes, Peter's childlike wonder, or Brian's philosophical musings, there's something in this animated chaos for everyone. So the next time you find yourself reaching for that remote at bedtime, remember that you're not just choosing mindless entertainment. You're selecting a carefully crafted comfort blanket that's helped millions of people transition from the stresses of the day into peaceful rest. Sweet dreams, and remember, in Quahog, everything always works out in the end. Picture this. It's 2 a.m. You're tossing and turning, unable to fall asleep. Your mind is racing with thoughts about tomorrow's responsibilities, that awkward conversation from 3 weeks ago, and whether you left the stove on. What you need isn't another meditation app or white noise machine. You need something perfectly mundane, yet oddly fascinating. You need random Family Guy facts that will occupy just enough of your brain to let sleep creep in without being so exciting that they keep you awake. Tonight we're diving into the wonderfully weird world of Quahog, with facts so specific and delightfully pointless that they'll have you drifting off faster than Peter Griffin at a feminist poetry reading. Let's start with something that sounds completely made up but is absolutely real. The chicken fights between Peter Griffin and Ernie the Giant Chicken have collectively lasted over 20 minutes of screen time across all episodes. 20 minutes. That's longer than most sitcom episodes dedicate to their main plot. These epic battles began over something so ridiculously petty that it perfectly encapsulates the show's absurdist humor. An expired coupon. Not a life-changing amount of money, not a family heirloom, but a piece of paper that saves you maybe 50 cents on chicken feed. Yet this trivial dispute has spawned some of the most elaborate and destructive fight sequences in television history. The creators didn't plan for these fights to become a recurring element. The first chicken fight was supposed to be a one-off gag, but audience response was so positive that it became a signature element of the show. Each subsequent battle had to top the previous one in terms of scope and destruction. They've fought in the streets, crashed through buildings, battled in the sky, and even taken their conflict underwater. The animators spend weeks choreographing these sequences, treating them with the same attention to detail that major studios reserve for blockbuster action films. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's production process. Every episode of Family Guy requires approximately 15,000 individual drawings. In the digital age, this seems almost quaint, but the show maintains a hand-drawn aesthetic that demands incredible attention to detail. Each character's movement, each facial expression, each background element starts as a pencil sketch. The animators have developed shortcuts and techniques over the years, but the fundamental process remains surprisingly labor-intensive. The voice actors record their lines before any animation begins, which means the animators have to match the drawings to the vocal performances rather than the other way around. This creates some interesting challenges. Seth MacFarlane voices multiple characters, and he often has conversations with himself during recording sessions. The sound engineers have become experts at seamlessly blending these multi-character performances, creating the illusion that Peter, Brian, and Stewie are actually in the same room talking to each other. Speaking of voices, here's a fact that demonstrates just how integral Seth MacFarlane is to the show's DNA. He voices 4 main characters, plus dozens of recurring characters and one-off personalities. When he temporarily stepped back from the show to focus on other projects, the producers seriously considered ending Family Guy rather than recasting his roles. They eventually found ways to work around his reduced availability, but it highlighted how deeply connected the show is to MacFarlane's specific vocal talents and comedic sensibilities. The show's relationship with censorship has produced some genuinely bizarre situations over the years. There are jokes that were cut from the television broadcast but restored for DVD releases, creating alternate versions of episodes that exist in different formats. Some episodes have different running times, depending on where and how you watch them. The censors have made requests that seem arbitrary to outside observers. Violence is often acceptable, but certain types of language or visual gags get flagged for removal. This has led to some creative workarounds by the writing team. They've developed a sort of code for getting controversial material past the censors. Sometimes they'll include an extremely offensive joke that they know will be rejected, making their actually intended joke seem mild by comparison. It's a psychological negotiation tactic that has become part of their standard writing process. Here's something that sounds like trivia, but actually reveals something profound about how the show is made. The writer's room keeps a collection of rejected joke ideas that they call the too weird pile. These aren't jokes that are too offensive or inappropriate, but rather concepts that are so strange or specific that they don't fit into any episode. Occasionally, they'll build an entire storyline around one of these orphaned ideas, which explains why some episodes feel like fever dreams that shouldn't work but somehow do. The show's approach to celebrity cameos is more strategic than it might appear. When famous people appear as themselves, they're usually playing exaggerated versions of their public personas rather than trying to seem likable or relatable. The writers deliberately lean into whatever characteristic or controversy that celebrity is known for, creating appearances that feel more like roasts than typical guest spots. This approach has occasionally caused problems when celebrities change their minds about how they want to be portrayed, leading to last-minute script changes or even canceled episodes. Family Guy's relationship with its own continuity is fascinatingly inconsistent. The writers will sometimes reference events from episodes that aired years earlier, demonstrating that they do pay attention to their own history. But they'll just as often completely ignore or contradict previously established facts about the characters or their world. This isn't laziness or poor planning, but rather a deliberate choice to prioritize individual episode quality over series-long consistency. The animation team has developed a visual shorthand for different types of scenes that regular viewers might not consciously notice but definitely feel. Flashback sequences use slightly different color palettes and animation techniques. Dream sequences have their own visual language. Even the way characters move changes depending on whether a scene is meant to be realistic or cartoonish within the show's already cartoonish world. Here's a production detail that reveals how much thought goes into seemingly throwaway moments. Background characters and crowd scenes aren't just randomly generated. The animators create specific individuals with their own implied backstories, even though these characters might only appear for a few seconds. They've developed a whole population of Quahog residents who appear in multiple episodes, creating an illusion of a lived-in community, even though most viewers would never consciously recognize these recurring background players. The show's musical numbers require a completely different production pipeline from regular episodes. They start with Seth MacFarlane or other musically inclined staff members creating rough recordings of the songs. Then professional arrangers develop full orchestrations. The voice actors record their vocals to these arrangements. Only after all the music is complete do the animators begin creating visuals to match. This process can take months for a single musical sequence, which explains why these segments often feel more polished and elaborate than the surrounding episode. Family Guy's approach to holiday episodes reveals something interesting about how the writers view their own show. They treat holiday specials as opportunities to experiment with different formats or storytelling techniques. Rather than simply plugging their characters into traditional holiday scenarios, Christmas episodes might be musicals, Halloween episodes might be horror parodies, and so on. This keeps the show from falling into the predictable patterns that plague many long-running series. The show's merchandise presents some unique challenges because of how the characters are designed. Peter Griffin's proportions don't translate well to three-dimensional objects, leading to action figures and toys that look subtly wrong. The merchandising team has had to develop modified character designs specifically for products, creating versions of the characters that maintain their essential appearance while being more practically manufacturable. Here's something that demonstrates the show's attention to detail in unexpected areas. The writers have created complete backstories for characters who have never appeared on screen. They know the names and personalities of Brian's parents, even though this information has never been relevant to any episode. They've developed detailed histories for minor recurring characters that extend far beyond anything that's ever been shown. This background work helps maintain consistency in how these characters behave, even when they're only making brief appearances. The show's relationship with its own spin-offs created some interesting continuity challenges. When the Cleveland show was in production, storylines had to be coordinated between writing teams to ensure that Cleveland's appearances on Family Guy didn't contradict what was happening on his own show. This led to some awkward scheduling situations where episodes had to be rewritten or delayed to maintain consistency across both series. Family Guy's approach to celebrity deaths has evolved over the years in response to changing cultural sensitivities. Early episodes would sometimes include jokes about recently deceased public figures, but the writers now generally avoid this territory. Unless enough time has passed for such references to feel like historical commentary rather than current events humor. This self-imposed guideline has prevented some potentially awkward situations where episodes would have aired shortly after unexpected celebrity deaths. The show's animators have developed specialized techniques for different types of scenes that regular viewers probably don't notice but contribute to the overall viewing experience. Fight scenes use different frame rates and animation principles than dialogue scenes. Fantasy sequences might employ completely different artistic styles. The animators treat each type of scene as requiring its own approach, making Family Guy more visually diverse than many people realize. Here's a fact that illustrates how deeply the show has embedded itself in popular culture. The writers receive hundreds of suggestions from fans every week, ranging from episode ideas to character suggestions to complaints about plot inconsistencies. While they can't use fan-submitted ideas for legal reasons, these communications help them understand how their audience perceives the show and what elements are most popular or problematic. The show's approach to social media and internet culture has changed dramatically over its run. Early episodes barely acknowledged the existence of the internet, while recent seasons treat social media and online culture as fundamental aspects of modern life. The writers have had to learn new forms of humor and reference that didn't exist when the show began, essentially evolving their comedy style to match changing technology and communication patterns. Family Guy's international versions present fascinating translation challenges. Jokes that rely on American cultural references or wordplay often can't be directly translated, leading to completely different jokes in dubbed versions. Some countries have created culturally specific versions of certain episodes, replacing American references with local equivalents. This has resulted in versions of Family Guy that are almost entirely different shows while maintaining the same basic characters and plot lines. The show's writers maintain detailed style guides that specify how each character speaks, what types of references they would make, and how they would react in different situations. These guides help maintain consistency across different writers and ensure that characters don't drift too far from their established personalities. Brian's dialogue, for example, follows specific patterns that reflect his pretentious intellectual aspirations, while Chris's speech patterns reflect his slower mental processing speed. Here's something that reveals the show's commitment to its own absurdist logic. The writers have created internal rules for how the show's universe works that they follow even when these rules are never explicitly stated. They know how long it takes to travel between different locations in Quahog, which characters know each other, and what each character's financial situation is like. This background consistency helps ground even the most ridiculous storylines in something resembling reality. The show's merchandise licensing deals have created some genuinely strange products over the years. There have been Family Guy-themed everything from breakfast cereals to car accessories to wedding decorations. The licensing team has to consider whether each potential product fits with the show's brand, leading to some philosophical discussions about what Family Guy represents as a cultural entity beyond just a television program. Family Guy's approach to controversial topics has become more sophisticated over the years, moving from simple shock value toward more nuanced satirical commentary. The writers now spend considerable time researching topics before writing about them, ensuring that their jokes come from a place of understanding rather than ignorance. This doesn't mean they avoid controversial subjects, but rather that they approach them with more intentionality. The show's animators have developed a visual signature that makes Family Guy immediately recognizable, even in brief clips or promotional materials. This involves not just character design but also choices about color palettes, camera angles, and motion principles. New animators joining the team have to learn these specific techniques to ensure visual consistency across different episodes and seasons. Here's a production detail that most viewers would never think about, but significantly impacts the viewing experience. The show's sound design team creates distinct audio signatures for different characters and locations. Peter's footsteps sound different from Brian's. The Griffin house has its own acoustic characteristics, and even the way doors close varies depending on the context. These subtle audio cues help create the illusion of a consistent physical world, even though everything is animated. As you drift off to sleep tonight, remember that somewhere in the world, animators are drawing the next batch of Family Guy episodes, voice actors are recording dialogue for situations that don't exist, and writers are debating whether jokes about topics you've never considered are funny enough to include in a television show. The machinery of entertainment continues turning even while you rest, creating the content that will occupy your mind during tomorrow night's journey toward sleep. Sweet dreams. And remember that in the grand scheme of things, we're all just characters in someone else's animated universe, trying to make sense of the absurd situations we find ourselves in. Have you ever wondered what goes on behind the scenes of your favorite animated shows while you're drifting off to sleep? Tonight, we're diving into the fascinating world of Family Guy, with some incredibly random facts that might just surprise you. So, grab your blanket, get comfortable, and let's explore the weird and wonderful universe of the Griffin family. Did you know that Family Guy wasn't originally supposed to be called Family Guy at all? Seth MacFarlane's original pitch to Fox was titled The Life of Larry, which was actually a 7-minute short film he created while studying at the Rhode Island School of Design. The executives liked it so much that they asked him to develop it into a full series, but they wanted a catchier name. After going through dozens of potential titles, they settled on Family Guy because it perfectly captured the show's essence of an average American family dealing with extraordinary situations. Speaking of Seth MacFarlane, here's something that might keep you up at night thinking about alternate timelines. MacFarlane was originally scheduled to be on American Airlines Flight 11 on September 11, 2001. He was supposed to fly from Boston to Los Angeles that morning, but he overslept and missed the flight by just 15 minutes. That flight was one of the planes that hit the World Trade Center. If he had made that flight, we might never have gotten Family Guy, American Dad, or The Orville. Sometimes, the smallest moments change everything. Now let's talk about the voices behind your favorite characters. You probably know that Seth MacFarlane voices Peter, Brian, and Stewie, but did you know he also voices Carter Pewterschmidt, Tom Tucker, and even Glenn Quagmire? That's right. The same person who voices the intellectual dog Brian also creates Quagmire's distinctive giggity giggity catchphrase. MacFarlane developed these voices during his college years, often entertaining friends at parties with his impressions and original character voices. Here's a random fact about Stewie that might surprise you. His distinctive football-shaped head wasn't originally part of his design. The animators were struggling with how to make a baby character visually interesting and memorable. During one late-night brainstorming session, someone jokingly suggested making his head shaped like a football, and everyone laughed. But the more they thought about it, the more it made sense. The unusual head shape would make Stewie instantly recognizable and add to his alien-like otherworldly intelligence. Sometimes the best ideas come from the most unexpected places. The character of Meg Griffin has an interesting backstory that goes beyond what we see on screen. Originally, Meg was supposed to be the breakout character of the show. The writers envisioned her as the relatable teenager that audiences would connect with most. However, as the show evolved, they realized that making Meg the constant target of the family's jokes created much funnier dynamics. This shift happened gradually over the first few seasons, and by season 3, Meg's role as the family punching bag was firmly established. Did you know that Family Guy holds several Guinness World Records? One of the most interesting is for the longest gap between a TV show's cancellation and its return to production. Family Guy was canceled in 2002 after 3 seasons, but DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim proved so popular that Fox brought it back in 2005. That's a 3-year gap, which was unprecedented at the time for an animated series. The famous chicken fight scenes between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken have their own fascinating history. The first fight appeared in the episode Da Boom and was originally intended to be a one-off gag. However, the animators had so much fun creating the elaborate fight sequence that they decided to make it a recurring element. Each subsequent chicken fight became more elaborate and destructive, with the animators treating them almost like action movie sequences. The fights have destroyed everything from fast food restaurants to airports, and the animation team spends months planning each new encounter. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's animation process. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 8 months to complete from start to finish. The process begins with the writer's room, where scripts are developed and refined. Then comes voice recording, which can take several weeks, as actors often record their lines separately. After that, the storyboard artists create rough sketches of every scene, followed by the actual animation process, which involves hundreds of individual drawings for just a few minutes of screen time. The character of Cleveland Brown was almost written off the show much earlier than his eventual departure for the Cleveland show. During Season 2, the writers were struggling with what to do with Cleveland's character, feeling like he didn't have enough distinct personality traits to warrant significant screen time. However, voice actor Mike Henry brought such warmth and humor to the role that the writers decided to develop Cleveland further, eventually giving him his own spin-off series. One of the most random facts about Family Guy involves the show's relationship with real-world events. The writers have an unusual policy about incorporating current events into episodes. Because of the long production timeline, they rarely reference events that happened less than 8 months before an episode airs. This has led to some interesting anachronisms, where characters will reference old news as if it just happened, creating an odd time bubble effect that longtime viewers have learned to expect. The character of Brian Griffin represents one of the most complex writing challenges in the show. Creating a talking dog, who serves as the voice of reason while still maintaining dog-like characteristics, requires a delicate balance. The writers often debate how much human intelligence to give Brian versus when to remind audiences that he's still fundamentally a dog. This internal contradiction has led to some of the show's most interesting character development moments. Did you know that several celebrities have refused to appear on Family Guy due to its controversial content? However, many others have embraced the show's irreverent humor. Adam West, who played the mayor of Quahog, loved his portrayal so much that he considered his Family Guy character to be his favorite role later in his career. West appreciated how the show exaggerated his public persona while still showing genuine affection for his Batman legacy. The Griffin family house has its own interesting design history. The animators based the house's exterior on a real home in Cranston, Rhode Island, not far from where Seth MacFarlane grew up. However, the interior layout was designed to be deliberately confusing and inconsistent. Rooms appear and disappear between episodes, and the house seems to have impossible spatial relationships. This was an intentional choice by the animators, who felt that a realistic house layout would be too limiting for the show's surreal storylines. Here's a fact that might surprise animation fans. Family Guy was one of the first animated shows to extensively use computer-generated imagery mixed with traditional animation. While the characters are still hand-drawn, many background elements, vehicles, and special effects are created using CGI. This hybrid approach allows for more dynamic camera movements and elaborate action sequences while maintaining the classic cartoon aesthetic that fans love. The show's famous cutaway gags have their own unique writing process. The writers maintain a separate document called the Cutaway Bible, which contains hundreds of potential cutaway ideas organized by category. When writing an episode, they can quickly reference this document to find gags that fit the moment. Some cutaways have been in this document for years before finding the right episode to appear in. Quagmire's character design underwent significant changes during the show's early development. Originally, he was going to be much older and was designed to look more like a stereotypical dirty old man. However, the animators felt this made him too creepy and unsympathetic. They gradually made him younger and more cartoonish, which allowed them to push his character's outrageous behavior further while keeping him somewhat likable. The voice of Stewie Griffin required Seth MacFarlane to develop a unique vocal technique. To create Stewie's distinctive British accent and sophisticated vocabulary, MacFarlane studied recordings of Rex Harrison, particularly his performance in My Fair Lady. He then combined this with elements of Thurston Howell III from Gilligan's Island to create Stewie's pompous, intellectual tone. MacFarlane has said that Stewie is the most physically demanding character for him to voice, often leaving recording sessions with a sore throat. One of the strangest production facts about Family Guy involves the show's approach to celebrity deaths. The writers maintain a file of pre-written jokes about various celebrities, organized by age and health status. This allows them to quickly produce episodes that reference celebrity deaths without seeming exploitative or rushed. However, they've occasionally had to scrap entire episodes when celebrities they'd written jokes about outlived expectations. The character of Joe Swanson was inspired by a real person that Seth MacFarlane knew in college. Joe's positive attitude, despite his disability, was based on a classmate who had been paralyzed in a skiing accident, but remained one of the most optimistic people MacFarlane had ever met. The writers take Joe's character seriously, often consulting with disability advocacy groups to ensure their portrayal is respectful, while still allowing for commentemporation of varioe. The show's trademark humor. Did you know that Family Guy has influenced real-world language? Several phrases from the show have entered common usage, including "giggity, shut up Meg," and "whose leg do you have to hump to get a dry martini around here?" Linguists have noted that the show's impact on casual speech patterns, particularly among younger viewers, has been surprisingly significant for an animated comedy. The show's musical numbers require a completely different production process than regular episodes. Seth MacFarlane, who has a background in musical theater, often writes the songs himself. The production team includes professional musicians and choreographers who help design the elaborate musical sequences. Some of the show's musical episodes have taken over a year to complete, with the songs recorded by full orchestras in professional studios. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's international versions. Family Guy is broadcast in over 50 countries, and many jokes are completely rewritten for different cultures. The German version, for example, changes many of the pop culture references to focus on German celebrities and historical events. The process of adapting the show for international audiences often requires rewriting entire scenes while maintaining the same comedic timing. The character of Death, who appears occasionally throughout the series, was almost given his own spin-off show. The concept would have followed Death as he went about his daily job of collecting souls, with each episode featuring guest appearances by Family Guy characters. The idea was shelved when the writers realized it would be too dark for the show's target demographic, but elements of the concept occasionally appear in Death's appearances on the main show. Family Guy's production team includes several former Disney animators who brought traditional animation techniques to the show's more elaborate sequences. This blend of old-school animation craftsmanship with modern computer technology gives Family Guy a unique visual style that sets it apart from other animated comedies. The animators often hide small details and Easter eggs in background scenes that only dedicated fans notice. The show's approach to time and continuity is deliberately inconsistent, but there's actually a method to the madness. The writers maintain what they call a flexible timeline, where characters can age or remain the same age depending on what serves the story best. This allows them to explore different aspects of characters without being locked into strict chronological progression. One final random fact to end our journey through the world of Family Guy. The show's theme song was originally much longer and included additional verses about each family member. The shortened version we know today was created for time constraints, but the full version occasionally appears in special episodes or DVD extras. Seth MacFarlane has mentioned that he'd love to do an entire episode featuring just the complete theme song with elaborate visuals for each verse. As we wrap up our exploration of these random Family Guy facts, remember that behind every animated comedy lies countless hours of creativity, planning, and attention to detail. Whether you're a longtime fan or just discovering the show, these behind-the-scenes glimpses reveal the incredible amount of work that goes into creating our favorite animated families. Sweet dreams, and maybe you'll dream of cutaway gags and chicken fights tonight. Until next time, keep exploring the fascinating worlds hidden within your favorite shows. Picture this. You're lying in bed, eyes heavy, ready to drift off into dreamland. But instead of counting sheep, what if I told you some absolutely wild facts about one of television's most chaotic families? Tonight, we're diving deep into the bizarre, hilarious, and sometimes disturbing world of Family Guy, with facts so strange, they might just lull you into the most entertaining sleep of your life. So get comfortable, dim those lights, and let me take you on a journey through Quahog that's perfect for your bedtime routine. Whether you're a die-hard fan or just need something to occupy your mind as you wind down, these Family Guy facts will give you plenty to think about as you drift off to sleep. Let's start with something that might surprise you about the show's creation. Family Guy almost never made it to air in the first place. Seth MacFarlane created the pilot when he was just 24 years old, working as a writer and animator for Hanna-Barbera. The original pilot was so different from what we know today that it's almost unrecognizable. Brian wasn't even supposed to be the sophisticated martini-drinking intellectual we know and love. Originally, he was just going to be a regular dog who occasionally spoke. But McFarlane decided that having a talking dog who acted completely normal would be funnier than having one who was still essentially just a pet. Speaking of Brian, here's a fact that might keep you thinking as you fall asleep. Brian Griffin is technically immortal in some episodes, but ages normally in others. The show has never been consistent about whether Brian ages like a regular dog or if he's somehow exempt from typical canine lifespans. In some episodes, he's mentioned to be around 7 years old in dog years, which would make him middle-aged. But in others, he references events from decades ago, as if he experienced them personally. This inconsistency is just one of many things that make Family Guy's continuity so fascinatingly chaotic. Now, let's talk about Stewie Griffin, the baby genius with questionable intentions. Did you know that Stewie's sexuality has been a subject of debate not just among fans but actually within the show's writing room? Seth MacFarlane has stated in interviews that Stewie is meant to be gay, but the character's sexuality has been portrayed inconsistently throughout the series. In early episodes, Stewie had crushes on various female characters, but later seasons have shown him with clear attractions to male characters. The writers have deliberately kept this ambiguous, which adds another layer to Stewie's already complex character. Here's something that might give you pleasant dreams. The voice actors for Family Guy are incredibly talented beyond just their work on the show. Seth MacFarlane, who voices Peter, Brian, and Stewie, is also an accomplished singer who has released several jazz albums. His singing voice is so good that he's performed with major orchestras and has even done tribute concerts to classic crooners like Frank Sinatra. Imagine Peter Griffin serenading you to sleep with smooth jazz standards. Let's dive into some facts about the show's most controversial character, Peter Griffin himself. Peter's weight has been a running gag throughout the series, but did you know that his exact weight has been mentioned multiple times with wildly different numbers? In some episodes, he's said to weigh around 270 pounds, while in others, the number jumps to over 300. The inconsistency is intentional, reflecting how the show treats Peter's physical characteristics as fluid depending on what's funniest for any given episode. Peter's job history is another source of endless entertainment and confusion. Throughout the series, he's worked at a toy factory, a brewery, various other random jobs, and has even been unemployed for extended periods. But here's what's interesting. The show never explains how the Griffin family maintains their lifestyle during Peter's unemployed periods. They live in a decent house in what appears to be a middle-class neighborhood, yet Peter's employment status seems to have no impact on their standard of living. It's one of those cartoon logic elements that you just have to accept. Speaking of the Griffin house, have you ever noticed that the layout seems to change between episodes? Sometimes there are rooms that appear out of nowhere, and other times, familiar rooms seem to vanish. The basement, in particular, seems to change size and purpose depending on the episode's needs. In some episodes, it's a small storage space, while in others, it's large enough to hold elaborate contraptions or even entire gatherings. This kind of flexible architecture is common in animated shows, but Family Guy takes it to particularly absurd lengths. Let's talk about Meg Griffin, the family's perpetual punching bag. Here's a fact that might surprise you. Meg was originally supposed to be the most normal character in the family, serving as the audience's point of view into this chaotic household. But as the show evolved, the writers found it funnier to make her the target of everyone's abuse. This shift happened gradually over the first few seasons, and by the time it was fully established, Meg had transformed from a relatable teenager into a character whose suffering was played for laughs. The voice of Meg has also changed throughout the series. Originally voiced by Lacey Chabert, the role was taken over by Mila Kunis starting in Season 2. The transition was so seamless that many viewers didn't even notice the change. Kunis was actually still a teenager when she started voicing Meg, making her closer in age to the character than most voice actors are to their animated counterparts. Here's a soothing fact about the show's animation style. Family Guy uses a technique called cutaway gags that allows for infinite creative possibilities. These brief segments, usually introduced by phrases like, "This is worse than the time," allow the animators to create completely different scenarios, time periods, and art styles within a single episode. Some of these cutaways reference obscure pop culture moments, while others create entirely fictional scenarios. The animators have said that creating these cutaways is one of the most enjoyable parts of working on the show because there are virtually no limitations on what they can create. Let's discuss some facts about Quahog, the fictional Rhode Island town where the Griffins live. The town's name is actually a type of clam, which is fitting given Rhode Island's coastal location. But here's what's interesting. The geography of Quahog seems to change depending on the episode's needs. Sometimes it's portrayed as a small town where everyone knows each other, while other times it seems large enough to support multiple shopping districts, airports, and major venues. The town has everything from a small town feel to big city amenities, depending on what the plot requires. The Drunken Clam, the bar where Peter and his friends hang out, is based on real bars that McFarlane frequented during his college years. The atmosphere and the type of conversations that happen there are drawn from McFarlane's actual experiences, which explains why the dialogue often feels so authentic despite the absurd situations. Here's something that might help you drift off. The show's theme song is intentionally designed to be catchy and memorable, but it's also shorter than most television theme songs. This was a deliberate choice to maximize the amount of time available for actual content in each episode. The brevity of the theme song allows for more jokes and story development, which is part of why Family Guy episodes often feel packed with content. Let's talk about some of the show's recurring characters and their origins. Glenn Quagmire, the Griffins' oversexed neighbor, was originally conceived as a minor character who would appear occasionally, but the writers found his character so entertaining that he became a regular part of the cast. His distinctive laugh and catchphrase, "giggity," weren't in the original character design, but developed naturally as the voice actor, Seth MacFarlane, experimented with the character's vocal patterns. Cleveland Brown, Peter's friend who eventually got his own spin-off show, was originally going to be a very different character. The writers initially conceived him as being more similar to Peter in personality, but they decided it would be funnier to make him the calm, rational member of the group. This decision led to Cleveland becoming the voice of reason among Peter's friends, often serving as a counterbalance to their more outrageous behavior. Joe Swanson, the paraplegic police officer, was created to add diversity to the show's cast, but the writers were careful to make his disability just one aspect of his character rather than his defining trait. In many episodes, Joe is the most competent and heroic character, often solving problems that the other characters can't handle. His wheelchair is rarely portrayed as a limitation, and he's often shown doing things that would be impossible for anyone, disabled or not. Here's a relaxing fact about the show's production schedule. Family Guy episodes are typically produced months in advance, which allows the animators and voice actors to take their time perfecting each episode. Unlike live-action shows that have to rush to meet weekly deadlines, animated shows like Family Guy can spend weeks on individual scenes, ensuring that every joke lands and every visual gag is perfectly timed. The show's writer's room operates on a collaborative system where anyone can contribute ideas, regardless of their official role on the show. This has led to some of the show's most memorable moments coming from unexpected sources. Sometimes the person responsible for continuity might suggest a joke that becomes central to an episode, or a voice actor might improvise a line that becomes a recurring catchphrase. Let's discuss some facts about the show's cultural impact that might give you something peaceful to think about as you fall asleep. Family Guy has been translated into dozens of languages, and each version faces the challenge of adapting American cultural references for international audiences. Some jokes that work perfectly in English become completely different jokes in other languages, while others are replaced entirely with references that local audiences will understand. The show's influence on internet culture has been enormous. Many of Family Guy's cutaway gags and memorable quotes have become memes that spread far beyond the show's original audience. The phrase, "oh no," in Peter's distinctive voice, for example, became a popular reaction GIF used in contexts that have nothing to do with the show itself. Here's something interesting about the show's approach to celebrity guest stars. Unlike many animated shows that cast celebrities to voice characters similar to themselves, Family Guy often has famous people voice characters that are completely different from their real personalities. This approach has led to some surprising and entertaining performances that showcase different sides of well-known actors and musicians. The show's approach to continuity is deliberately inconsistent, which actually makes it more relaxing to watch in some ways. You don't need to remember every detail from previous episodes to understand what's happening, because the show often contradicts its own established facts for the sake of a good joke. This means you can watch episodes in any order and still enjoy them fully, which is perfect for casual viewing or when you're trying to wind down. Let's talk about some facts about the show's music and sound design. Family Guy employs a full orchestra for many of its musical numbers, which is unusual for an animated television series. This attention to musical detail means that even throwaway songs and cutaway gags are often surprisingly well-produced and catchy. The show's composers have backgrounds in both television and theatrical music, which explains why many of the musical segments feel like they could work on stage. The sound effects in Family Guy are often created in unusual ways. The iconic sound of Peter falling down and hurting himself, which happens in almost every episode, is actually a combination of several different sounds layered together. The voice actors often provide their own sound effects during recording sessions, which gives the show a more organic feel than if all the sounds were added in post-production. Here's a fact that might help you smile as you drift off. The show's animators often hide small details in backgrounds that only the most observant viewers will notice. These Easter eggs can be anything from references to other shows, inside jokes among the production staff, or even tiny animations that have nothing to do with the main story. Finding these hidden details has become a hobby for some fans, who watch episodes multiple times just to catch things they missed. The show's approach to time and aging is fascinatingly inconsistent. While the characters never seem to get older, the show acknowledges the passage of time in other ways. Technology updates, cultural references change, and real-world events are incorporated into episodes. This creates a strange temporal bubble where the characters exist in a perpetual present that somehow includes decades of cultural history. Let's discuss some production facts that showcase the incredible amount of work that goes into each episode. A single episode of Family Guy requires thousands of individual drawings, even though much of the animation is now done digitally. Each character expression, each background element, and each special effect needs to be designed and animated individually. The attention to detail is remarkable when you consider how quickly episodes need to be produced. The voice recording process is also more complex than you might expect. While Seth MacFarlane voices multiple characters, he rarely records them in conversation with each other during the same session. Instead, each character's lines are recorded separately, and the conversations are constructed in post-production. This means that MacFarlane has to imagine how his different characters would interact with each other and adjust his performance accordingly. Here's something soothing to consider. Despite all the chaos and controversy surrounding Family Guy, the show has created jobs for hundreds of people over its many seasons. Animators, voice actors, writers, musicians, sound engineers, and countless other professionals have built careers working on this show. In a way, all of this absurd humor has created a small community of creative people who work together to bring these ridiculous stories to life. The show's international success has also led to cultural exchange in unexpected ways. American animators have learned techniques from international studios, while animators from other countries have brought their own cultural perspectives to American television. This cross-pollination of ideas has enriched the medium of animation as a whole. As we near the end of our journey through these Family Guy facts, let's consider something that might give you pleasant dreams. The show's enduring popularity suggests that there's something universally appealing about stories of dysfunctional families who, despite all their problems, somehow stick together. Even though the Griffin family is exaggerated to absurd proportions, there's something recognizable about their dynamics that resonates with audiences around the world. The show's ability to find humor in everyday situations, even when those situations are taken to impossible extremes, reflects a fundamentally optimistic view of life. No matter how bad things get, there's always something to laugh about. This perspective can be oddly comforting when you're trying to wind down from your own day's challenges. So, as you drift off to sleep tonight, you can think about this wild, wonderful, and completely unpredictable animated world where anything can happen, where the impossible is routine, and where laughter is always just around the corner. Sweet dreams, and may your rest be as peaceful as a Quahog evening, minus all the explosions and chaos, of course. Whether you're a longtime fan or someone who's just discovered these bizarre facts, I hope this journey through Family Guy's strange universe has given you something entertaining to think about as you fall asleep. Remember, in the world of animation, anything is possible, and tomorrow is just another opportunity for new adventures and unexpected laughs. Hey there, night owls and Family Guy fanatics. If you're settling in for some late-night entertainment and your brain is ready to drift off into dreamland, I've got the perfect collection of wild Family Guy facts that'll either help you doze off peacefully or keep you wide awake wondering how this show even exists. Tonight, we're diving deep into the bizarre, chaotic, and absolutely insane world of everyone's favorite dysfunctional animated family. Let me start with something that'll blow your mind right off the bat. Did you know that Peter Griffin has an astronomical body count that would make serial killers jealous? We're talking thousands of deaths, and honestly, most of them happened in the most ridiculous ways possible. This isn't your typical cartoon violence where characters bounce back with cartoon physics. Peter has legitimately caused more destruction than some natural disasters. Speaking of Peter's mayhem, his very first kill happened way back in the second episode of the entire series. Remember that Roadrunner from Looney Tunes? Yeah, Peter straight up ran that bird down with his car, flattening it completely. What makes this even funnier is Peter's reaction afterward, casually asking if he hit an ostrich while the Roadrunner is clearly pancaked on his windshield. This moment basically set the tone for everything that would follow in the series. But here's where things get really wild. Peter once literally took over Death's job in the show, and with that cosmic responsibility came the power to kill people just by touching them. During his stint as the Grim Reaper, he accidentally killed 2 airplane pilots mid-flight simply because he forgot to wear mittens. Can you imagine being a passenger on that plane? Thankfully, actress Karen Black was somehow there to land the aircraft, or everyone would have died in that crash too. The hospital incidents are particularly disturbing when you think about them. Peter somehow convinced people to let him work as a doctor, which is terrifying enough on its own, but then he actually killed a patient during what should have been a routine procedure. The patient even thanked Peter for saving his life right before dying, which adds this darkly comedic layer that only Family Guy could pull off. Here's a fact that might help you sleep better or give you nightmares, depending on your perspective. Peter once worked as a babysitter and literally left a baby to drown in a bathtub. He casually walked away, leaving behind drain cleaner in case of clogs, soap next to a radio, and towels on the roof. The complete negligence and absurdity of this situation perfectly captures Peter's character. He's simultaneously well-meaning and catastrophically incompetent. The show took Peter's violence to cinematic levels during various parody episodes. When they did their Kill Bill homage, Peter went full samurai warrior mode, engaging in what can only be described as a sword-fighting bloodbath. The choreography was surprisingly well animated for a show that usually relies on simple character movements, and Peter managed to take down 15 opponents all by himself in pure martial arts mayhem. Then there's Peter's brief career as a superhero parody called Red Stool, which was obviously their take on Deadpool. The name comes from the fact that his cancer specifically affected his rear end, because of course Family Guy would go there. As Red Stool, Peter maintained Deadpool's tendency for extreme violence, adding several more bodies to his ever-growing count while cracking inappropriate jokes the entire time. The Walter White parody deserves special mention because it perfectly captured the essence of Breaking Bad while maintaining Family Guy's signature chaos. Peter as Heisenberg was just as dangerous as the original, dropping bodies left and right while somehow making it comedically absurd rather than genuinely threatening. The transformation from bumbling father to calculating criminal mastermind was surprisingly well executed for a show known more for cutaway gags than character development. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Peter's violence is how it affects his own family. He once accidentally killed his entire family through carbon monoxide poisoning, and his reaction was essentially wondering if his day's work was worth it. Sure, they all came back in the next episode because cartoon logic, but the casual way Peter processes causing his loved ones' deaths is genuinely unsettling when you think about it too deeply. The fight scenes with Ernie the Giant Chicken are legendary among Family Guy fans, and for good reason. These battles have spanned multiple episodes and caused more collateral damage than most action movies. They've fought in airports, construction sites, moving trains, and even hijacked time machines to battle across different historical periods. The destruction they cause is absolutely massive, with buildings collapsing, vehicles exploding, and innocent bystanders getting caught in their ridiculous feud. What makes the chicken fights even more absurd is that they started over an expired coupon. Think about that for a moment. These two characters have caused thousands of deaths, millions of dollars in property damage, and untold chaos across multiple dimensions, all because of a disagreement about a coupon's validity. It's the perfect example of Family Guy's ability to take tiny conflicts and escalate them to world-ending proportions. The time travel elements in their fights add another layer of complexity and destruction. When Peter and Ernie crash through different time periods, they're not just affecting the present day, they're literally altering history itself. The poor driver of that futuristic train they destroyed was probably just trying to get to work in his cyberpunk timeline. And suddenly, he's vaporized because two idiots from the early 21st century decided to continue their grocery store dispute across the space-time continuum. Here's something that might surprise you. Peter has actually caused more deaths through his various acts of terrorism, albeit usually accidental ones. When he befriended a terrorist named Mahmoud, Peter was completely oblivious to what was happening. All he cared about was the attention and perks of his new friendship. When Mahmoud gave him what Peter thought was a phone, he kept trying to use it to make calls, not realizing it was actually a bomb detonator. The explosions that resulted from Peter's innocent phone calls were catastrophic. Each time he tried to dial Mahmoud, another building would explode somewhere in the city. The fact that Peter remained completely clueless about what was happening makes it both hilarious and terrifying. Even when the gang managed to stop Mahmoud's planned attack on a bridge, Peter still had that detonator and used it again while trying to call a restaurant for reservations. The crossover episode with The Simpsons showcased Peter's destructive capabilities on an even grander scale. His fight with Homer Simpson leveled entire city blocks and resulted in mass casualties that would normally be associated with natural disasters or military conflicts. The two fathers' brawl started over Peter insulting The Simpsons show, which escalated into a city-destroying conflict that somehow ended with both characters gaining superpowers from radioactive waste. One particularly disturbing sequence involved Peter's brief stint as a high school student, where he arranged for a school shooting to get revenge on popular kids who ignored him. Even though he called it off at the last minute, the attack still went through, and the screams and gunshots in the background suggest multiple casualties among innocent children. This episode aired during a time when such events were unfortunately becoming more common in real life, making Peter's involvement even more unsettling. Peter's various explosions of hospitals deserve special mention for their sheer scale of destruction. When he disagreed with vaccines, he dressed as the Joker and blew up an entire medical facility just to prevent Stewie from getting a shot. The explosion was massive enough to level the building and likely killed dozens of patients, doctors, nurses, and staff members who were just trying to provide health care. But he didn't stop there. Peter later destroyed a children's hospital in another equally senseless act of destruction. The casual way the show presents these incidents, with Peter treating the explosions like minor inconveniences rather than mass casualty events, perfectly captures the dark comedy that Family Guy specializes in. It's simultaneously hilarious and deeply disturbing. The missile incidents showcase Peter's ability to cause destruction on a military scale. During his fight with President Trump, Peter's head got slammed onto a big red button that launched multiple missiles. Each missile likely killed hundreds of people in massive explosions, turning what started as a personal dispute into an international incident with catastrophic consequences. What's particularly interesting about Peter's character is how the show manages to make him sympathetic despite his astronomical body count. He's never intentionally malicious. He's just incredibly stupid and impulsive with access to dangerous situations. This combination makes him simultaneously lovable and terrifying, which is probably why the character has remained popular for over 2 decades. The physics of Peter's destruction often defy logic, even by cartoon standards. When he and Ernie crashed that Ferris wheel, it rolled through the city like a massive wheel of death, flattening everything in its path. The scale of destruction was apocalyptic, but it was presented with such absurd cartoon logic that viewers could laugh at it rather than being horrified by the implications. Peter's various career changes always seem to result in multiple casualties. Whether he's working as a doctor, babysitter, death himself, or any other profession, people end up dying as a direct result of his incompetence. It's actually impressive how consistently dangerous he is across all walks of life. There's literally no job safe enough for Peter Griffin to perform without causing fatalities. The show's commitment to continuity regarding Peter's violence is surprisingly strong for a series that usually ignores consequences. Characters who die in one episode rarely come back, unless there's a specific plot reason, and the destruction Peter causes often gets referenced in later episodes. This attention to detail makes his actions feel more impactful than typical cartoon violence. Here's a fun sleeping fact. The total estimated death toll directly caused by Peter Griffin throughout the series is approaching 3,000 people. That number includes direct kills, collateral damage from his fights, explosions he's caused, and various accidents resulting from his stupidity. To put that in perspective, Peter has personally caused more deaths than many historical disasters. The international incidents Peter has triggered would realistically make him one of the most wanted criminals on the planet. He's blown up bridges, destroyed government buildings, launched military missiles, and caused diplomatic crises with multiple countries. Yet somehow he continues living his normal suburban life without any legal consequences, which is perhaps the most unrealistic aspect of a show featuring a talking baby and a martini-drinking dog. As you drift off to sleep tonight, remember that somewhere in the Family Guy universe, Peter Griffin is probably causing another catastrophe that will add to his ever-growing body count. Sweet dreams, and maybe avoid any neighborhoods where middle-aged men are having disputes with large poultry. In the world of Family Guy, such conflicts have a tendency to escalate into city-leveling disasters that make natural catastrophes look like minor inconveniences. The beautiful absurdity of Peter's character is that despite being responsible for more destruction than most fictional supervillains, he's still somehow the protagonist we're supposed to root for. That's the magic of Family Guy, taking the most inappropriate situations and making them laugh out loud funny through sheer audacity and perfect comedic timing. Now close your eyes and let these wonderfully bizarre facts carry you off into dreamland, where hopefully giant chickens and expired coupons can't hurt you. Picture this. You're lying in bed, ready to drift off to sleep, but your brain just won't switch off. Well, tonight's different. Tonight, we're going on a gentle journey through the wonderfully weird world of Family Guy with some truly fascinating facts that'll help ease you into dreamland. So get comfortable, close your eyes if you want, and let's explore the Griffin family universe together. Let me start with something that might surprise you. Peter Griffin wasn't always meant to be the bumbling father figure we know today. The creators originally envisioned him as more of a traditional sitcom dad. But Seth MacFarlane quickly realized that making Peter completely incompetent would be far more entertaining. This decision shaped the entire show's DNA, creating a character whose stupidity knows no bounds. Speaking of Peter's origins, here's a delightfully absurd detail about his background. According to the show's mythology, Peter is actually of mixed Irish and Mexican heritage, which explains some of his more colorful personality traits. His biological father, Mickey McFinnigan, lives in Ireland and has a talking sheep companion named O'Brien. When Peter finally meets Mickey, they bond over a drinking contest, because of course they do. It's these little touches of insanity that make Family Guy so uniquely entertaining. The Griffin family tree is absolutely bonkers when you really dig into it. Take Francis Griffin, Peter's strict Catholic stepfather who despised Lois for not being Irish enough. This man was so religiously rigid that he even dismissed the Pope's approval of Peter and Lois's marriage. But here's the kicker. Francis later became the Pope's special assistant. The irony is delicious, and it perfectly captures the show's love of contradictory character development. Now, let's talk about something that might help you sleep better: the show's approach to time and continuity. Unlike many animated series that maintain strict timelines, Family Guy operates in a floating timeline where characters can age or stay the same age depending on what the story needs. Stewie, for instance, has been 1 year old for over 2 decades, yet he's traveled through time, built complex inventions, and had philosophical discussions about existence. This fluid approach to reality creates a dreamlike quality that's oddly soothing. Here's a gentle fact about Chris Griffin that showcases the show's surprising depth beneath all the chaos. Despite being portrayed as academically hopeless, Chris actually has genuine artistic talent. In one episode, he gets accepted to art school, but chooses to stay with his family instead. It's moments like these that remind us there's heart underneath all the madness, even in characters who seem purely comedic. Let me share something about Stewie that's both fascinating and oddly comforting. His relationship with Brian the dog represents one of television's most unusual friendships. They've been through adventures across time and space. They've argued like an old married couple, and when Brian died, Stewie was so heartbroken, he literally rewrote time to save him. There's something beautiful about that level of devotion, even in a cartoon about talking dogs and genius babies. The voice acting in Family Guy is another soothing element worth considering as you drift off. Seth MacFarlane voices multiple main characters, including Peter, Brian, and Stewie, essentially having conversations with himself for hours during recording sessions. Imagine the surreal experience of being alone in a sound booth, switching between a baby's British accent, a dog's sophisticated tone, and a grown man's childish outbursts. It's like a one-person theater performance that's been going on for decades. Here's something wonderfully absurd about the show's background characters. Cleveland Brown, Peter's neighbor and friend, was originally just meant to appear in a few episodes, but his calm, measured way of speaking proved so funny when contrasted with Peter's chaos that he became a main character and eventually got his own spin-off show. Sometimes the best things in life happen by accident, which is a nice thought to carry into sleep. Let's explore some of the more obscure Griffin family members, because their stories have a mythical quality perfect for bedtime. There's King Arthur Griffin, an ancestor who could supposedly pull Excalibur from the stone. Then there's Moses Griffin, who led the Jews out of Egypt while complaining about billboards and demanding more Jolly Ranchers. The show creates these elaborate historical figures that exist purely to set up jokes, but there's something wonderfully imaginative about building an entire fictional lineage. The relationship between Stewie and his stuffed bear Rupert is oddly touching when you think about it. This genius baby, capable of building time machines and mind control devices, still needs his security blanket in the form of a simple teddy bear. It reminds us that no matter how complex we become, we all need something soft and familiar to hold on to. That's a comforting thought as you settle into your own bed. Family Guy's approach to cutaway gags creates a unique storytelling rhythm that's almost hypnotic. The show will interrupt itself mid-scene to show us a completely unrelated flashback or fantasy sequence, then seamlessly return to the main story. It's like how our minds work when we're falling asleep, jumping from one random thought to another without any logical connection. Yet somehow, it all flows together. Here's a fascinating detail about Meg Griffin that reveals the show's unexpected complexity. Despite being constantly mistreated by her family, actress Mila Kunis has mentioned in interviews that playing Meg taught her about resilience and finding humor in difficult situations. The character, who seems to exist purely for abuse, actually represents something deeper about perseverance and maintaining hope even when everything seems to go wrong. The show's relationship with censorship has always been playful rather than aggressive. When certain words can't be said on television, the characters find creative ways around it, often making the censored version funnier than the uncensored one would have been. There's something delightfully subversive about finding humor within constraints, like creating art within specific rules. Let me tell you about Brian's literary aspirations, which add a layer of melancholy to his character that's perfect for quiet reflection. He's constantly working on novels that never get published, struggling with alcoholism, and dealing with the existential crisis of being a talking dog in a world that doesn't quite make sense. His failures are deeply human, reminding us that everyone struggles with their dreams and disappointments. The background music in Family Guy deserves more recognition than it gets. The composers create these elaborate orchestral pieces for scenes that last only seconds, treating throwaway gags with the same musical attention as epic movie moments. There's something beautiful about that level of craftsmanship being applied to the most ridiculous situations imaginable. Quagmire's house being right next to the Griffins creates an interesting dynamic that's been running for over 20 years. These neighbors, who are simultaneously friends and enemies, who know each other's secrets but continue to be surprised by each other's actions. It's like a very slow, very weird sitcom relationship that unfolds over decades rather than seasons. The show's treatment of death is uniquely casual and somehow comforting because of it. Characters die and come back regularly. Time gets rewritten, and consequences are often temporary. In a world where permanence can feel overwhelming, there's something soothing about a universe where mistakes can be undone and second chances are always available. Here's something about the show's animation style that contributes to its dreamlike quality. The characters are drawn with simple, clean lines that make them feel both familiar and slightly unreal. Their movements are fluid but exaggerated, creating a world that feels just removed enough from reality to be purely entertaining rather than stressful. The recurring theme of Peter's various jobs throughout the series creates a sense of endless possibility. He's been everything from a bodega owner to a Renaissance artist to a country music star, often within the same season. There's something liberating about a character who can completely reinvent himself whenever the story demands it, suggesting that we all have infinite potential for change. Family Guy's approach to celebrity cameos is uniquely self-aware. When famous people appear on the show, they're often playing exaggerated versions of themselves, or completely different characters entirely. It creates this meta-textual layer where reality and fiction blend together in ways that feel dreamlike and surreal. The show's relationship with its own continuity is fascinatingly relaxed. Characters will reference events from previous episodes as if they happened, then completely contradict those same events in the next episode. It's like how dreams work. Everything makes perfect sense until you try to examine the logic too closely. Let me share something about the show's writing process that might interest you as you drift off. The writer's room for Family Guy is known for being one of the most collaborative in television, with jokes being refined and improved by multiple people before making it to air. Each throwaway line has been polished by a room full of comedy writers, which explains why even the smallest moments often contain multiple layers of humor. The relationship between Lois and Peter represents something uniquely optimistic despite all their problems. No matter how much chaos Peter creates, no matter how frustrated Lois becomes, they always find their way back to each other by the end of each episode. It's a cartoon version of unconditional love that's oddly reassuring. Stewie's gradual evolution from would-be world conqueror to adventure-seeking toddler reflects the show's own maturation over time. Early Stewie was genuinely menacing, plotting elaborate schemes to murder his mother. Modern Stewie is more interested in friendship and exploration. It's like watching a character literally grow up, even though he's technically stayed the same age. The show's use of musical numbers creates these unexpected moments of pure joy in the middle of chaotic episodes. Characters will suddenly break into elaborate song and dance routines that rival professional Broadway productions, then immediately return to the mundane problems of suburban life. These musical interludes feel like shared dreams where anything is possible. Family Guy's approach to social commentary is gentle rather than preachy, which makes it perfect bedtime viewing. The show addresses serious topics through the lens of absurd situations, making complex issues feel manageable rather than overwhelming. It's comedy as comfort food, nourishing without being heavy. The longevity of the show itself is something worth contemplating as you prepare for sleep. Family Guy has been on television for over 2 decades, meaning that some viewers have literally grown up with these characters. There's something deeply comforting about having fictional friends who are always there, always ready to entertain you, no matter what's happening in your real life. Brian's death and resurrection storyline remains one of the most emotionally powerful moments in the show's history. When the writers temporarily killed off the beloved character, the fan reaction was so intense that they brought him back within a few episodes. It demonstrated that beneath all the irreverence and chaos, people genuinely care about these animated characters as if they were real friends and family members. The show's treatment of mundane activities, like grocery shopping, going to work, or sitting in traffic, transforms everyday boredom into comedic gold. There's something oddly therapeutic about seeing ordinary frustrations played out in exaggerated cartoon form. It makes your own daily annoyances feel more manageable and even potentially funny. Here's something beautiful about the show's approach to friendship. Peter's relationship with his drinking buddies at the Drunken Clam represents a very specific type of male bonding, sitting around, talking about nothing important, and just enjoying each other's company. In our increasingly connected but somehow isolated world, there's something nostalgic and appealing about that kind of simple, uncomplicated friendship. The show's relationship with its own past creates interesting layers of nostalgia. Characters will reference things that happened in earlier seasons as if they were childhood memories, creating this sense of shared history between the audience and the fictional characters. It's like having old friends who remember the same funny stories you do. As we near the end of our journey through Family Guy facts, consider how the show serves as a kind of modern folklore. These characters and their ridiculous adventures have become part of our shared cultural vocabulary. People quote Peter Griffin the way previous generations might have referenced folk tales or classic literature. In a weird way, the Griffin family has become America's unofficial cartoon family, as recognizable as any real celebrity. The show's ending credits often feature the characters sitting on their couch, watching television just like the audience is doing. It creates this mirror effect, where fiction and reality blend together in a peaceful domestic scene. After all the chaos and adventure of each episode, everyone ends up exactly where they started, at home, together, ready to do it all again tomorrow. And that's perhaps the most comforting thing about Family Guy. No matter how crazy things get, no matter what disasters befall the Griffin family, they always end up back home, safe and sound, ready for the next adventure. It's a universe where problems are temporary, love is permanent, and there's always something to laugh about, even in the strangest situations. So as you drift off to sleep tonight, take comfort in knowing that somewhere in the animated town of Quahog, the Griffin family is probably getting into some ridiculous situation that will somehow work out just fine by morning. Sweet dreams. And remember, no matter how weird your own dreams get tonight, they probably won't be any stranger than a typical Family Guy episode. Sleep well, knowing that laughter truly is the best medicine. Even in cartoon form, the Griffin family will be there tomorrow, ready to entertain you with more wonderfully weird adventures whenever you need them. Good night.